Hey everyone, tonight we travel back to a time when a simple itch could unravel your entire world, when fear was a currency traded in whispers, and when the authorities had a rather forceful approach to public health. We're going to explore what it was like to be plucked from your life and locked away for 40 days, all because of a suspicious-looking rash. You'll be at the very heart of the story, feeling the damp chill of the stone walls and the creeping dread of the unknown. And let's be honest, given the state of 15th century medicine and sanitation, you probably won't survive this. But we're here for the journey, not the destination, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. For those of you settling in for the night, I'd love to see where you're listening from. Go ahead and post your city or country and the local time in the comments below. For my podcast listeners, a follow and a like help the channel immensely and ensure you don't miss the next part of our little adventure. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first sign of trouble isn't dramatic. It's not a sudden fever or a dizzying spell. It's just an itch. An utterly mundane, distracting little itch on the inside of your left forearm. You're sitting on your usual stool, the low afternoon sun filtering through the small leaded glass window of the workshop. The air is thick with the comforting, familiar sense of your trade, the sharp tang of curing leather, the musty sweetness of old paper, and the subtle, earthy smell of the flour paste you're using to bind a new psalter. As an apprentice to a bookbinder in the heart of Venice, your world is one of quiet, focused repetition. You tool intricate patterns into softened calfskin stitch signatures of vellum, together with practiced, steady hands, and dream of the day you'll be a master yourself. You scratch the itch absent-mindedly with your right thumbnail, not even looking down. Your master, a man whose patience is as thin as the gold leaf he so carefully applies, doesn't appreciate idle hands. A good apprentice is an invisible one, a silent pair of hands that anticipates the next task. Your current task is recasing a wealthy merchant's collection of poetry, and the pressure to make every seam perfect is immense. The itch persists. It's a stubborn, nagging sensation, a tiny flaw in an otherwise predictable afternoon. You try rubbing the spot against the rough-spun wool of your tunic, then against the smooth, cool edge of the wooden workbench. It offers a moment's relief, but the feeling soon returns, a low thrum of irritation under your skin. It's probably nothing. The summer heat has been oppressive, blanketing the city's canals and alleyways in a humid haze. Heat rash is common, or maybe it was a flea. In a city built on water, teeming with people from every corner of the known world, fleas are just a fact of life, as common as pigeons in the Piazza San Marco. You probably picked one up at the market this morning while buying bread. It's a small price to pay for living in the most magnificent city in the world, the Serenissima, the great maritime republic whose ships are the lifeblood of Christian Europe. This city, your city, was one of the very first to create a sophisticated public health system to protect its vital trade interests, a fact that brings a strange sort of civic pride even to a humble apprentice like you. Later, as twilight bleeds purple and orange across the sky, the master finally dismisses you. You trudge up the narrow stairs to your small attic room, the day's fatigue settled deep in your bones. You pour some cool water from a ceramic pitcher into a basin, the simple act of washing away the day's grime, a cherished ritual. As you splash the water onto your arms, your eyes finally fall upon the source of the day's annoyance. It's not a single bite. It's a small cluster of reddish bumps, no larger than a silver coin, angry-looking against your pale skin. You freeze the water dripping from your fingertips back into the basin. Your heart gives a sudden hard thump against your ribs. You tell yourself to be rational. Just last week, you helped the master mix a new batch of green pigment for an illuminated manuscript. The recipe called for verdigris, which you made by suspending a copper plate over a pot of vinegar. Maybe you were careless and some of the acidic vapor irritated your skin. It makes perfect sense. Still, you can't help but think of the proclamations plastered on church doors and public wells, the stern warnings from the Magistrati alla Sanità, the health office urging citizens to report any unusual sickness, any boils or spots on pain of fines or worse. You dry your arm gently, your mind racing. You could try a poultice. Your mother used to make one with mallow root and goose fat for any manner of skin ailment, swearing it could soothe anything from a burn to a bee sting. It was one of 100 little folk remedies people relied upon. Some of your neighbors swore by rubbing the afflicted area with a piece of stolen bacon, which seemed more like an excuse for a midnight snack than a legitimate cure. You make a mental note to acquire some mallow root tomorrow. Yes, that's the plan. A simple herbal remedy, and this whole silly business will be forgotten. But as you lie on your straw mattress listening to the distant lapping of canal water and the occasional shout of a gondolier, a cold knot of dread tightens in your stomach. The city is a paranoid place. Though the great pestilence of a century ago is a tale from your great-grandparents' time, the lesser waves of sickness are a constant, terrifying threat. Historians still argue whether the primary vector was the rat flea as traditionally believed, or if human-to-human transmission through lice and fleas played a much larger, more terrifying role. But for you, the academic debate is meaningless. What matters is the fear. You've seen the health officers in the street, their faces impassive, as they escort entire families to the quarantine barges. You've heard the whispers about the lazarettos, the quarantine stations on the outer islands, places people go, but don't always return from. You pull your sleeve down firmly over your forearm as if hiding the rash from sight could make it cease to exist. It's just an itch, you tell yourself again, closing your eyes and forcing your breathing to slow. A simple, harmless itch. By morning it will be gone. It has to be. Morning arrives not with the gentle blush of dawn you usually appreciate, but with a stark gray light that feels accusatory. Before your eyes are fully open, your hand is already on your forearm. You run your fingertips over the spot, feeling the rough texture of your tunic sleeve. For a blissful, half-conscious moment, you allow yourself to believe it was all a bad dream, a phantom itch cooked up by a tired mind, and too much stale bread for supper. But then you sit up, push the sleeve back, and the hope evaporates like morning mist off the canals. The rash is still there. If anything, the bumps seem a shade redder, a little more pronounced, as if offended by your brief moment of optimism. Your first panicked instinct is to scrub it away. In the chilly privacy of your attic room, you pour more water into the basin and take a coarse piece of linen rubbing at your arm with a frantic energy. You scrub until the skin turns raw and tender, hoping to somehow erase the marks through sheer force of will. But the effort is useless. The bumps remain, now surrounded by an angry red halo of your own making. You've only made it worse, more noticeable. You stare at your reflection in the basin's murky water, a pale, worried face staring back. This thing is not a stain. It is a part of you. The plan from last night resurfaces, the mallow root poultice. It feels like a thin thread of hope in a rising tide of fear. Getting the ingredients, however, means going out into the city, into the world of seeing, judging eyes. You pull on your outermost tunic, making sure the sleeve is fully down the cuff, securely fastened at your wrist. You may as well be hiding a stolen jewel. Every step you take on the way to the herbalist's stall near the Rialto market feels fraught with peril. The city is awake now, a cacophony of vendors hawking their wares, children chasing stray dogs, and the ever-present murmur of gossip. You keep your left arm pressed tightly to your side, a gesture you hope looks natural, but which feels as stiff and obvious as a confession. You see two women whispering by a well, their eyes darting towards a house with a freshly barred door. You catch a fragment of their conversation, the whole family, taken before sunrise, and you hurry past, your heart hammering against your ribs. The city's paranoia is a palpable thing, an invisible contagion spreading faster than any sickness. People look at each other differently. A cough in a crowd causes heads to turn. A stumble in the street earns suspicious glares instead of helping hands. Everyone is a potential threat, and you with your secret rash feel like a traitor, a walking lie. At the apothecary's stall, a cluttered cavern of dried herbs, strange tinctures, and dangling bundles of roots, you try to sound casual. You ask for a chunk of mallow root and a small pot of goose fat, items so common they shouldn't raise an eyebrow. But the apothecary, a man with eyes like tiny black beads, seems to study you for a moment too long. For a chesty cough, he asks, his voice raspy. No, you reply a little too quickly. For a salve. For my hands, the bookbinding work makes them dry. He grunts, taking your coins without another word, but you feel his gaze on your back as you retreat into the crowded alleyway. Back in the sanctuary of your room, you prepare the poultice. You mash the fibrous root with the back of a spoon, the woody scent filling the small space. Then you mix the pulp with the greasy yellow-white goose fat until it forms a thick, lumpy paste. It's a messy, slightly nauseating process, but it's action. It's a fight against the passive dread that threatens to consume you. You carefully smear the concoction over the rash and bind your arm with a clean strip of linen. You've wrapped it so thoroughly you could probably use your arm as a club, which might be a more effective way to deal with any suspicious neighbors. The bandage is clumsy and thick under your sleeve, a constant physical reminder of your secret. At work, the day is a slow-motion torture. Every time your master glances in your direction, you expect him to notice the bulkiness of your sleeve. "Did you injure yourself?" he finally asks. His eyes narrowed not with suspicion, but with his usual air of perpetual annoyance. You almost choke on your own breath. "Yes, master. A burn. From the cooking pot this morning. It's nothing." He seems to accept the lie, or at least he's more concerned with a smudge fleck of gold leaf on page 12 than with your sudden onset clumsiness in the kitchen. For the rest of the day, you work with a stiff, unnatural precision, terrified of snagging the bandage or revealing its edge. The poultice doesn't seem to be doing much. The itch is still there, a dull, insistent pulse beneath the layers of linen and grease. By late afternoon, desperation gnaws at you. You recall hearing an old woman in your neighborhood, a seller of Lucky Charms, talking about the purifying power of fasting spittle. She claimed that saliva, when one hasn't eaten since sunrise, held a special potency against all manner of ailments from warts to curses. At the time, you'd scoffed. Now, in the dusty quiet of the workshop, you find a moment alone and cautiously unwrap a corner of your bandage. You feel utterly ridiculous dabbing your own spit onto your arm like you're trying to clean a smudge off a priceless manuscript. Still, it's cheaper than the goose fat. This is the kind of frantic grasping at straws that happens when official medicine is both terrifying and useless. Historians still argue whether the elaborate rules of health written by medieval physicians focusing on diet, sleep, and emotional balance had any meaningful impact or were merely expensive placebos for the wealthy who could afford to follow them. For you, a bookbinder's apprentice, a bit of spit is about as sophisticated as it gets. When you finally return to your room that night, you feel 100 years older than you did yesterday. You unwrap the bandage with trembling fingers. The linen is stained yellow from the goose fat, and it smells faintly sour. You wipe the greasy residue away, and you stare. The rash is precisely as it was. It hasn't faded or shrunk. It hasn't spread or worsened. It is simply stubbornly there. The home remedies, your mother's wisdom, the old woman's strange magic, they have all failed. You sit on the edge of your mattress, the useless bandage in your hand, and for the first time a profound sense of hopelessness washes over you. This isn't a simple irritation. This is a mark. And in a city sick with fear, a mark is a verdict waiting to be read. The next few days pass in a blur of quiet terror. You abandon all pretense of finding a cure. The failed poultices and greasy linen strips are gone, thrown into the murky canal under the cover of darkness. Your goal has narrowed to a single all-consuming task: concealment. You are a curator of your own secret, your body a museum with a single forbidden exhibit. You perfect the art of existing in the world with one arm held slightly closer to your body, of picking things up exclusively with your right hand, of turning your body in conversations to keep your left side angled away from view. You've become so adept at skulking in the shadows of your own home. You're considering a career change, though. Anxious recluse probably doesn't pay very well. You wake before dawn to fetch your water, avoiding the morning rush at the communal well. You eat your meals of bread and cheese alone in your room instead of sharing a bench with the other apprentices. You are becoming a ghost in your own life, and the effort is profoundly lonely and exhausting. The bookbinding work, once a source of pride and focus, is now a minefield of potential exposures. You live in mortal fear of your master asking you to hold a large, heavy sheet of leather that requires two hands. Each day you make it to twilight without being discovered feels like a victory, but a hollow one, as you know you have to do it all again tomorrow. Your apartment building is arranged around a small shared courtyard. Directly across from you lives Signora Elena. She is a permanent fixture of the neighborhood, a widow with hair the color of iron filings and eyes that miss nothing. Signora Elena's gaze is a well-known local phenomenon, believed to be capable of souring milk and discerning the contents of a sealed letter from 50 paces. For your entire life, she has been a source of both comfort and irritation. She'd scold you for tracking mud into the courtyard, then press a warm, honey-soaked pastry into your hand a moment later. You considered her a known quantity, a harmlessly nosy but fundamentally decent part of your world. One afternoon, you're leaning far out of your window trying to hook a shirt that has slipped from your grasp and fallen onto the narrow ledge below. It's a clumsy, awkward position. You're stretched out, your right hand gripping the window frame for balance, your left arm extended to its full length as you strain to reach the fabric with a long stick. For that one fatal moment, your focus is entirely on the runaway shirt. Your sleeve, loose and unfastened in the privacy of your room, has slid all the way down to your elbow. Your forearm, with its damning constellation of red bumps, is fully exposed to the afternoon sun. You snag the shirt and pull it back inside triumphant for a split second, and then you look up. There she is, Signora Elena, standing at her window, a basket of laundry under her arm. She isn't looking at the sky or at the laundry or at the cat sleeping on the rooftop opposite. She is looking directly at you. Her gaze flickers from your face down to your bare arm, and then just as quickly back up to your eyes. It's a micro-expression, a flash of something unreadable, surprise, fear, calculation. But you see it. You see it all. Your blood turns to ice water in your veins. You snatch your arm back inside as if you've touched a hot coal, your heart leaping into your throat. You look back at her window. Elena gives you a small, tight-lipped smile that doesn't reach her eyes, a smile you've never seen on her face before. Then she slowly turns and disappears into the shadows of her own apartment. The rest of the day is an exercise in pure torment. You pace the confines of your small room, replaying that single silent moment of eye contact 1,000 times. Did she really see it? The light wasn't perfect. Perhaps she just thought it was a shadow or a trick of the sun. Even if she did, would she understand its potential meaning? And even if she understood, would she say anything? This is Elena who gave you a spoonful of her own sugar syrup for your cough last winter. This is Elena who always asks after your mother. She wouldn't, would she? You find yourself making a small, superstitious gesture with your right hand, the sign against the malacchio. The evil eye, just in case her stare was more than simple observation. It was a common belief that a powerful gaze, especially one tinged with envy or ill will, could bring about misfortune. It's a silly thought, but in your heightened state, you're willing to believe in anything. The city's administrative structure, the six sestieri, made Venice a collection of intimate villages. Everyone knew everyone, and the local officials in charge of each district relied on this closeness. They relied on people to notice things, to report things. Historians still argue whether these citizen-led reports were primarily driven by genuine public-spiritedness, or if they became a tool to settle personal scores, petty grievances, and neighborhood rivalries under the convenient, terrifying banner of plague prevention. Had you somehow offended Elena without realizing it? Was her laundry basket cleaner than yours? The possibilities are as endless as they are maddening. You don't see her for the rest of the day. Her window remains shuttered. You try to take it as a good sign, a sign of shame perhaps, or a sign of solidarity. You cling to that fragile hope as you fall into a fitful sleep, your dreams filled with silent, staring faces and doors that won't lock. You wake with a gasp, the dread of the previous day returning instantly. You decide to go to work. You must maintain normalcy. To do anything else would be an admission of guilt. You wash your face dress with trembling hands and take a deep breath. You are just about to unlatch your door when you hear it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate ascending the wooden staircase. Not the light, scurrying steps of the other apprentices or the slow shuffle of your master. These are confident, official footsteps. They stop directly outside your door. Then comes the knock. It's not the frantic banging of an emergency, nor the polite tap of a visitor. It's a firm, resolute, threefold knock that echoes in the small room, a sound of absolute authority. It's the kind of knock that doesn't say, "Can I borrow a cup of sugar?" It's a knock that says, "We have some questions about your recent life choices and also potentially infectious diseases." You stand frozen in the center of your room, your hand hovering over the door latch. In that deafening silence between the knock and your next breath, you know, the thread of hope has snapped. Signora Elena didn't just see, she went to the authorities. She pointed her finger not with her hand but with her words. And her whisper has brought the full weight of the Venetian Republic to your doorstep. Time seems to slow down each beat of your heart, a heavy drum against the silence. The knock comes again, sharper this time, impatient. It's a sound that cannot be ignored. A part of you, a small rebellious child in the back of your mind, wants to stay frozen, to simply not answer, to pretend you're not there. But the absurdity of that thought is crushing. Where would you go out the window? You are 3 stories up. There is no escape. Taking a breath that feels thin and useless. You walk the few steps to the door, your legs feeling like lead weights. Your hand trembles as you lift the iron latch. You pull the heavy wooden door inward just a crack. 2 men stand on the landing, their forms filling the narrow space. One is familiar Marco, a junior constable from your sistiere. A man you've seen a dozen times patrolling the alleys or breaking up arguments at the wine shop. He's young with a face that's usually ruddy and cheerful, but today it's pale, and he steadfastly refuses to meet your eyes, focusing instead on a fascinating spot on the wall just over your shoulder. The constable looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, perhaps wrestling a crocodile or explaining a new tax hike to a mob of angry fishermen. Anywhere but here. And then there's the other man. You don't need an introduction. He is exactly as the terrifying fireside stories describe. He is the medico della peste, the plague doctor. He is a figure built of shadows and fear. A long, heavy coat of waxed black canvas covers him from his neck to his ankles, shining dully in the dim light of the stairwell. Leather gloves conceal his hands, and he holds a long, thin wooden staff, more of a wand than a walking stick. But it's the head you can't look away from. He wears a mask unlike anything else on Earth. It has a smooth, tight-fitting hood with 2 round glass discs for eyes. And from these eyes juts a long, grotesque beak like that of some monstrous prehistoric bird. You can't decide if the beak makes him look more like a carrion crow or a man who lost a fight with a very pointy loaf of bread. Either way, it's not a great look for a healthcare professional. They don't ask for permission. Marco the constable gently but firmly pushes the door fully open, forcing you to step back. They enter your tiny room, and the space immediately shrinks the air, growing thick and heavy. The doctor brings a strange smell with him, a pungent cloying aroma of vinegar camphor and a dozen other sweet and spicy scents all mixed together. It's the smell of his defenses, the cloud of perfume he carries with him to ward off the invisible evil of the pestilence. The famous beak, you know, isn't for show. It's a primitive respirator stuffed with a potent herbal mixture known as theriac, a cocktail that could include anything from mint and cloves to myrrh and ambergris. It was all designed to fight the miasma, the bad air that everyone believed carried the seeds of the plague. The doctor is a silent entity. He's the strong, silent type. Unfortunately, the strong part refers to the smell of pickled herbs, and the silent part means you have absolutely no idea what he's thinking. He drifts towards the center of the room, his glass eyes scanning everything: your unmade bed, your work tools, you. He raises his wooden staff and points it directly at your left arm. It is not a request, it is a command. There's no fight left in you. The days of hiding and frantic remedies are over. Numbly, you obey, slowly rolling up the sleeve of your tunic. The rash on your forearm feels like it's glowing, burning under the intensity of his unseen gaze. You can feel Marco shifting his weight nervously behind the doctor, taking a subtle step away from you. The doctor leans forward. You can hear the faint crackle of his waxed coat. The smell of his herbal armor intensifies. He still doesn't speak. He uses the tip of his long staff to gently prod the skin around the rash, pushing the flesh, tilting your arm to see it in the light from the window. The touch is impersonal, the wood cold against your warm skin. It's the way you might poke at something dead on the road, something you don't want to get too close to. You feel less like a patient and more like a piece of contaminated cargo being inspected on a dock. Historians still argue about how effective these outfits actually were. While the waxed coat might have prevented fleas from latching on, and the mask offered a barrier against droplets from a cough, their main function was likely psychological. They created a wall of terror and authority, separating the world of the sick from the world of the healthy. Looking at this silent bird-like creature currently deciding your future, you can confirm it is psychologically very effective. He finishes his inspection. The entire examination has lasted less than a minute. He straightens up to his full height, the beak of his mask seeming to point at the ceiling for a moment, as if sniffing the air in your room for any final trace of disease. He turns his head, the glass eyepieces fixing on the constable. He gives Marco a single sharp, decisive nod. And that's it. That's the verdict. There is no consultation, no discussion, No questions asked, just a nod, a simple movement of a head concealed within a terrifying mask, and your life has been irrevocably altered. The doctor seems to lose interest in you instantly. His work here is done. He turns and glides out of your room without a backward glance, his job merely to identify, not to deal with the consequences. Marco the constable finally meets your gaze. In his eyes, you see a flicker of something you didn't expect: pity. He clears his throat, his voice rough as he delivers the sentence that was passed without a single word being spoken to you. By order of the most excellent magistracy of health, Marco begins, his voice low and formal as if he's reading from an invisible scroll. You are to be transferred for observation. The words hang in the air, clinical and strange. Transferred for observation. It sounds so reasonable, so benign. Like you're a curious plant being moved to a sunnier window. But you know what it means. Your mind, which had been frozen in shock, suddenly reboots in a flurry of panic. No, you say the word, a weak croak. You try again, louder this time. No, you don't understand. It's just a rash. It's been there for days. I'm not sick. I have no fever, no weakness. Ask my master. I worked a full day yesterday. You take a step towards him, your hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. It's a mistake. The doctor, he didn't even speak to me. He was here for a minute. Marco holds up a hand, his expression weary. It's a look you imagine he's perfected. The look of a man who has to deliver terrible news on a regular basis. Your master has already been informed. Your position will be held. The magistracy is very thorough. Thorough, you almost laugh, the sound hysterical. He poked me with a stick. You ask if you can speak to a supervisor or maybe file a strongly worded complaint. Marco gives you a look that suggests you've just asked if you could borrow the Doge's hat for the weekend. There is no appeal, he says, his voice flat, leaving no room for argument. The medico's assessment is final. It is not a punishment. It is a precaution. The health of the Republic is paramount. He says it like a creed, a line memorized and repeated until it has lost all meaning. The health of the Republic. You, it seems, are a potential threat to that health. Your small, insignificant life, your plans to become a bookbinder, your worries about paying rent, all of it is secondary to the abstract concept of Venice's well-being. Your rash is no longer a personal medical issue. It's a matter of state security. How long you whisper the fight draining out of you, replaced by a cold, heavy resignation? How long is the observation? 40 days, Marco says. 40 days. 40 giorni. The number is so specific, so absolute. It's an awkwardly long amount of time. Too long to just hold your breath, but not quite long enough to learn a new language or knit a full-size tapestry of your many, many grievances. And it is here in this moment that you understand the true historical weight of your sentence. The very word for your fate, quarantine, was born right here in the lagoons of your city. It comes directly from that phrase, 40 giorni. It was the length of time the health office, in its infinite wisdom, decreed that all ships arriving from plague-ridden ports must wait at anchor before anyone could set foot on Venetian soil. It was your city's great innovation, a wall of time built to keep pestilence at bay. And now you are to be subjected to your own city's brutal invention. But why 40? Why not 30 or 50? The number wasn't just pulled from a hat. It was chosen because it resonated with a power far older than the Venetian Republic. It was a number of biblical trial and purification. It reigned for 40 days and 40 nights during Noah's great flood. Moses spent 40 days on Mount Sinai before receiving the law. Christ fasted for 40 days and 40 nights in the desert, tempted by the devil. 40 days was the period required for a spiritual trial, a time of waiting and suffering that led to a judgment or a rebirth. Your quarantine, you realize with a sickening lurch, is not just a medical isolation. It is a state-sanctioned penance. You are being sent into the wilderness. Historians still argue whether the 40-day period was chosen for this deep symbolic significance, or if it was based on a surprisingly astute, if perhaps accidental, observation of the plague's maximum incubation and infectious period. Perhaps a doctor somewhere along the line noticed that if a ship's crew was going to get sick, they'd likely show symptoms within about a month. The extra 10 days were just a buffer, a margin for error. Or maybe it was just a convenient marriage of burgeoning science and ancient superstition. For you, the reason is irrelevant. The result is the same. The inevitability of it all finally settles on you, a shroud of cold dread. Your shoulders slump. Marco seems to notice the change. His voice softens slightly. You are to be taken to the Lazaretto Nuovo, he says, naming the newer of the city's two quarantine islands. It is for observation only, for the suspected. It is not the Vecchio. He adds, referring to the old Lazaretto, the island reserved for the actively, horribly sick. He says this as if it's a great comfort, like being assigned to a slightly less terrible circle of hell. He looks genuinely sorry for you, which is a small, cold comfort, but you'd frankly prefer it if he looks sorry enough to have a sudden change of heart and suggest you both make a run for it. Then he delivers the final soul-crushing blow, the one that rips you from the abstract horror and plunges you into a practical nightmare. Gather your things, he says, gesturing vaguely at your room. A change of clothes, a blanket if you have one. Nothing more. We leave in 10 minutes. And there it is. 40 days. 10 minutes. Your entire life, your future, your freedom, all boiled down to an impossible choice. You look around your small, familiar room. At the worn copy of Dante you were saving up to rebind for yourself. At the small wooden bird your father carved for you years ago. At the rumpled sheets on your bed. What do you take with you into oblivion? What single object do you choose to represent your entire world for the next 40 days? The question is so enormous, so impossible, it leaves you standing breathless in the center of the room as the clock begins to tick. 10 minutes. The words echo in the sudden vast emptiness of your room. Marco the constable stands impassively by the open door, a human hourglass marking the final grains of sand in your old life. For a paralyzing moment, your mind is a complete and total blank. 10 minutes to pack for a 40-day journey into the unknown. How do you even begin? What do you take? What do you leave behind? You have the absurd thought to just grab your straw mattress. It's not practical, but at least you could have a comfortable nap while contemplating your grim future. Marco's posture, rigid and impatient, suggests this is not on the list of approved items. The paralysis breaks and you're jolted into a frantic, clumsy dance. You lunge for your small wooden chest. A change of clothes, he said. You pull out your only other tunic, the one you saved for feast days. It's made of slightly better wool. You fold it with shaking hands, the familiar texture doing nothing to soothe you. A spare pair of leggings. Your cloak. You grab the thickest one you own, the one meant for sharp winter winds. Even in the summer heat, you have a feeling the island will be cold, a place of damp stone and chilling sea breezes. You stuff them into a small canvas satchel. The bag is already half full. Your gaze darts around the room, cataloging your meager possessions, trying to perform a brutal triage of sentiment versus survival. Your worn copy of Dante's In Inferno. Its cover, soft with use, seems to mock you from the bedside table. Taking it feels like a cruel joke, a bit too on the nose for your current predicament. Besides, it's heavy. Books are a luxury you can no longer afford. Your eyes land on the small, crudely carved wooden bird your father gave you when you were a child, a little sparrow with one slightly lopsided wing. It has sat on your windowsill for years, a silent companion. It weighs almost nothing. It takes up no space. You snatch it from the sill and slip it deep into your pocket, your fingers closing around the smooth, familiar wood. It feels like a tiny, solid anchor in a world that has turned to water. Every second is precious. Marco clears his throat, a polite but firm reminder. He's trying to look impassive, but you can see him tapping his foot. Apparently the plague waits for no man, and the Venetian bureaucracy waits for even less. You look around one last time. You probably should have tidied up a bit, but then again, unexpectedly incarcerated due to a suspicious rash is a pretty good excuse for not making your bed. You sling the paltry satchel over your shoulder, the weight of it feeling both insignificant and impossibly heavy. You walk towards the door towards Marco. As you do, you can't help but think about the items you're bringing. The authorities were deeply suspicious of personal belongings, especially textiles like clothing and bedding. While they didn't understand germ theory, they knew from brutal experience that the sickness clung to objects. They called this invisible threat fomites. Anything you bring with you is suspect, tainted by your mere association. You have a strong feeling your meager possessions are not coming with you for comfort, but as evidence to be impounded and purified along with your body. You take one final sweeping look at your room, the way the light hits the dusty floorboard, the faint smell of leather and paste, the indentation on the mattress where you slept last night, blissfully, stupidly unaware. It was your sanctuary, and now it looks alien, a place you're no longer welcome. You pull the door shut, and the soft click of the latch is the loudest sound you've ever heard. It's the sound of a chapter ending. The journey down the stairs is a walk of shame. The commotion has drawn your neighbors from their apartments. Doors are held ajar just a crack with shadowy faces and wide, fearful eyes peering out at you. No one speaks. The silence is thick with accusation. As you pass their doors, you see some of them clutching charms. One woman holds a silver crucifix to her lips. An old man is sniffing furiously at a pomander, a metal ball filled with perfume, as if he can block your contaminated air from reaching him. One family, known for having more money than sense, has their young son holding up a piece of what they claim is unicorn horn, likely a worthless piece of narwhal tusk bought from a swindling merchant, but a prized and desperately trusted prophylactic against the plague. At the bottom of the stairs, your master is waiting. He stands with his arms crossed over his chest, his face a thundercloud of annoyance. You search his expression for a shred of sympathy, for a kind word. You find none. Does the workshop need to be sealed? He asks, not looking at you, but at Marco. No, the constable replies. The case is only suspect. His contagion is not confirmed. Business can continue. Your master gives a curt, relieved nod. His primary concern, it's clear, is the uninterrupted flow of commerce. You half expect him to hand you an invoice for the lost productivity as you're being dragged away. He turns without another word and disappears back into the workshop, closing the door firmly behind him. And just like that, you are no longer his problem. Historians still argue about the social dynamics of these moments. Was the community's coldness a sign of pure self-preservation, a necessary emotional distancing from the potentially doomed, or did it reflect a deeper belief that plague was a form of divine punishment, marking the victim as a sinner who deserved their fate? As you stand there feeling the collective weight of their fear and judgment, it feels like all of the above. Marco places a hand on your upper arm, not roughly, but with an unyielding firmness, and guides you out the main door of the building. You step from the familiar gloom into the bright, almost violent afternoon sun. You have to squint. For a moment, the world outside seems impossibly normal. A woman is haggling over the price of fish. Two children are chasing a hoop down the cobblestone alley. The sounds, the smells, the light, it's all the same as it was this morning. But you are different. You are no longer a participant in this world. You are a prisoner, an exile in your own city, blinking in the sunlight before being led into the dark. Marco guides you from the doorway into a narrow, sun-drenched alley. Waiting there is your chariot. This is not the grand Venetian procession you'd always dreamed of. There are no trumpets, no flying banners, just a simple two-wheeled cart with high wooden sides hitched to a mule whose expression of profound boredom suggests it has seen this all many times before. It's the sort of cart used for hauling firewood or cabbages or, more grimly, the rubbish and refuse of the city. Today, you are the refuse. Another guard, a burly man with a face like a slab of granite, stands by the mule holding its reins. He doesn't acknowledge you, his gaze fixed on some distant point over the rooftops. You get the sense that small talk is not part of the transporting the potentially plague-ridden training manual, probably for the best. Marco gestures to the back of the cart. There are no steps. You have to awkwardly hoist yourself up and over the side, your satchel bumping against your back, and drop ungracefully onto the rough, splintery floorboards. You land with a jolt that rattles your teeth. Marco climbs in after you, positioning himself by the front of the cart, his back to you, while the new guard takes up a walking position alongside. With a lurch and a groan of wood, the cart begins to move. The journey is a slow, jarring parade through the labyrinth of your own city. Venice is a city built for feet and boats, not for wheels. The cart bumps and rattles over the uneven flagstones of the calle, the narrow alleyways, its iron-rimmed wheels making a dreadful racket that announces your presence long before you arrive. Every jolt sends a shockwave up your spine. You try to brace yourself to find some small measure of stability, but it's no use. You are simply cargo tumbling about at the mercy of the road. You become a spectacle, a free show for a fearful public. As the cart clatters into a small campo or square, the daily rhythm of life comes to a halt. A baker, his hands white with flour, freezes in his doorway. Two women haggling over a bolt of cloth fall silent, their heads turning in unison. Children stop their games to point their expressions, a mixture of curiosity and horror, until their mothers rush forward, snatching them up and covering their eyes as if your very image were a contagion. You're the most popular person in town if by popular you mean aggressively stared at by strangers who are simultaneously praying for your immediate disappearance. It's a new kind of celebrity. The whispers follow you, a rustling wave of sound. Peste, plague, unclean. You hear the word untor, an oiler, a greaser, a reference to the conspiratorial belief that some people deliberately spread the disease by smearing infectious goo on doorknobs and walls. It's a hateful, ignorant word, and it's being aimed at you. People make the sign of the cross as you pass. A man spits on the ground in your wake. The collective fear of the city coalesces and finds a target. And that target is you sitting alone in the back of a garbage cart. You try to make yourself small to shrink into a corner and stare at the dirty floorboards, studying the patterns of old stains and dirt. But you can't resist the morbid urge to look up to see the faces in the crowd. You see Signor Rossi, the butcher from whom you've bought sausage, his face grim as he pulls his shutters closed. You see a girl you think you recognize from another workshop, who quickly turns her head, her braid whipping through the air, as she pretends to be fascinated by a wall. Each averted gaze is a tiny paper cut on your soul, a severance of the ties that once bound you to this community. You are no longer one of them. You are a thing to be removed. This public journey is a grim reminder of the cart's other more frequent use during times of sickness. These same carts, pulled by these same bored mules, were the city's death carts. They made their rounds at night, collecting the bodies of the dead left outside their homes. To be riding in one while still alive feels like a terrible omen, a dress rehearsal for a funeral you are not yet dead enough to attend. Historians still argue whether this public parading of the suspected was a deliberate policy of terror designed to scare the populace into compliance and reporting, or simply an unavoidable consequence of the city's logistics with no deeper motive than getting a person from point A to point B. From your vantage point on these hard planks, it certainly feels like a calculated lesson in shame. As you pass a larger thoroughfare, you hear the strident voice of a town crier in the distance, his bell ringing to draw a crowd. He's likely announcing some new decree from the health office, a stricter curfew perhaps, or a ban on public gatherings. In another quirky and desperate attempt to control the air itself, the Doge had recently ordered the city's church bells to be rung 3 times a day, believing the vibrations would help disperse the deadly miasma. The entire city is vibrating with fear, and you are its epicenter. Finally, after an eternity of bumps and stairs, the cramped alleys give way to a wide-open space. The air changes, losing the scent of bread and humanity, and taking on the sharp, salty tang of the lagoon. You've reached the Zattere, the long stretch of waterfront on the southern edge of the city. The cart rolls to a stop on the sun-bleached stone quay. Before you is the vast, shimmering expanse of the water, dotted with fishing boats and merchant ships. And they're moored at a separate guarded dock as a flat-bottomed barge. It's starkly functional, with a single boatman at the tiller and 2 more guards waiting on board. It is empty, and it is waiting for you. The rattling journey across the stones is over. The silent journey across the water is about to begin. You are prodded out of the cart by Marco, who for the first time avoids even the pretense of touching you, using the tip of his staff to gesture you forward. You stumble onto the stone quay, your legs stiff and unsteady after the jarring ride. The transition is swift and silent. Marco exchanges a nod with one of the guards on the barge, a silent transfer of custody. You are a parcel being passed from one courier to the next. Your journey on land is over. Marco turns and walks back towards the city without a backward glance, his duty done, leaving you in the hands of new wardens. The barge guards are just as grim and silent as the ones who brought you here. One of them points a gloved finger at the barge. You step onto the damp, salt-bleached planks, which rock unsteadily beneath your feet. The barge is little more than a floating wooden platform with a few benches and a short, stubby mast. You sit where you are told, a rough-hewn bench in the center of the vessel. The boatman, a leathery old man with a face a roadmap of wrinkles, pushes off from the dock with a long pole. A moment later, a guard unfurls a simple square sail, which catches the lagoon breeze with a soft thwump. The barge begins to glide across the water, leaving the familiar sounds of the city behind. The shouts of vendors and the ringing of church bells are replaced by the gentle lapping of water against the hull. the creak of the mast and the lonely, piercing cry of gulls overhead. The guards take up positions at opposite ends of the barge, their arms crossed, staring out at the horizon. They are about as chatty as the stone statues on the Doge's palace. You suppose their job description is 90% staring grimly into the middle distance, and they are excelling at it. As Venice shrinks behind you, a profound and aching sadness settles in your chest. The city's famous skyline, the golden dome of St. Mark's Basilica, the soaring height of the Campanile, the forest of masts in the harbor becomes a distant, beautiful mirage. It's your home. You have never left it before, and now you are being exiled from it, sailing away like a traitor being banished. The beauty of it all shimmering in the afternoon light is almost too much to bear. You are heading toward a key part of the very system that made Venice so powerful. The city's wealth was built on maritime trade, and with trade came the constant threat of disease. To protect itself, Venice created the world's first state-run quarantine system. In 1423, they repurposed a nearby island, naming it Lazaretto, likely after the biblical figure of Lazarus, the patron saint of lepers. This first island, now known as Lazaretto Vecchio. The old Lazaretto was essentially a plague hospital, a place for the confirmed sick to go, and more often than not to die. But later in 1468, the Republic established a second island, Lazaretto Nuovo, the new Lazaretto. This was a different concept. It was not for the sick, but for the suspected. It was a massive filter, a holding pen, where the crews and cargo of newly arrived ships would wait out their 40 days to see if the pestilence would emerge among them. This is your destination. You are not yet condemned as sick, only as suspect. It's a small but crucial distinction. After what feels like an hour but is probably only half that time you see it, a smudge on the horizon grows into a solid shape, an island breaking the flat plain of the lagoon. As you draw closer, you see that it's not the charming seaside villa you were hoping for. There are no gentle sandy shores or picturesque fishing huts. The island is a fortress. The first thing you notice is the wall. A high brick wall, 10 or 12 feet tall, fortified with stone, encircles the entire island right at the water's line. It's not a decorative wall, it's a statement of purpose. It was not built to repel invaders from the sea, but to imprison potential contagions from within. Above the wall, you can see the red-tiled roofs of long, low buildings, laid out in unnervingly straight lines. They look like army barracks, or more accurately, warehouses. There is a tall watchtower near the center of the island, a single eye keeping watch over its captives. The architecture is brutally functional, stripped of all the grace and beauty that defines Venice. This is a place of utility, a machine for processing people. The whole island looks like it was designed during the early miserable period. Very chic. Historians still argue about the daily experience within these lazarettos. Were they truly hellish, mismanaged prisons, as some sensationalist accounts suggest? Or were they, for their time, relatively orderly and effective institutions that, while unpleasant, saved countless lives through their rigorous application of isolation? From where you're sitting, watching this grim fortress grow larger and larger, you're leaning heavily towards the hellish prison theory. The barge is aimed at a single break in the formidable wall, a stone-arched water gate reinforced with a heavy iron portcullis that is currently raised. It looks like the gaping mouth of a sea monster waiting to swallow you whole. This is the only way in or out. The boatman expertly guides the barge toward the opening. As you glide under the archway, the bright open expanse of the lagoon is suddenly cut off. The high walls loom on either side. The sound of the wind and waves is replaced by a muffled, enclosed silence. You have arrived. The journey is over. The barge bumps gently against an internal stone dock. The world has shrunk to the size of this island. Venice, your home, might as well be on the other side of the moon. The barge scrapes against the stone of the internal dock with a low grating sound. A new set of guards waits for you on the quay. They wear the same grim expressions as all the others, but theirs seem more permanent, baked in by the island's sun and the relentless monotony of their work. One of them motions for you to disembark. You step onto the soil of the Lazaretto Nuovo, and the ground feels unnervingly solid after the gentle rocking of the barge. The watergate, your only link to the outside world, is already being closed behind you, with a groan of protesting wood and iron. You are officially inside. You are led without a word from the dock towards one of the long, low buildings you saw from the water. Its facade is stark, streaked with salt and damp. Pushing open a heavy wooden door, the guard ushers you into a large chilly room. The air inside smells sharp and clean, but not in a pleasant way. It's the acrid bite of vinegar and the lingering ghost of wood smoke. The floor is paved with large, uneven stone flags, and the only furniture is a single scarred wooden desk and a stool. Behind the desk sits a man, a clerk. He doesn't look up, immediately busy sharpening the nib of his quill pen with a small, sharp knife. He is thin and pale with an air of profound, unshakable boredom. The clerk has the kind of weary expression that says, "I've seen it all, and I was deeply unimpressed by every single bit of it." He finally deigns to notice you, his eyes flicking over you, with no more interest than if you were a sack of grain. "Name," he says, his voice a flat monotone. You tell him your name. He dips his pen in an ink pot and scratches it into a vast leather-bound ledger. Trade, apprentice bookbinder, street. He records your address, the place that was your entire world just this morning, now reduced to a line of ink in a forgotten book. He doesn't ask how you are. He doesn't explain what will happen next. The welcome wagon seems to have gotten lost on its way to the island. His record-keeping is the only formality you will be granted. When he is done writing, he sets down his pen and looks at you. Everything he says gesturing with his chin. Clothes satchel. On the desk. This is it. The moment of total surrender. Under the watchful, indifferent gaze of the clerk and the guard, you slowly begin to undress. Each item of clothing you remove feels like shedding a layer of your identity. Your cloak, your tunic, your leggings, your worn leather shoes. They all connect you to your life, to your trade, to your past. To be forced to take them off in this cold, impersonal room is a profound humiliation. You are left standing in nothing but your thin linen undershirt shivering slightly in the cool air. The guard takes your satchel and unceremoniously dumps its contents onto the desk. Your spare tunic and cloak spill out. The clerk pokes at them with the end of his pen. Then he picks up the small wooden bird you had carefully placed in your pocket. He holds it up, turns it over in his fingers, his expression unchanging. It is the one thing that connects you to your family, to love, to a time before fear. To him, it is just another piece of wood. He tosses it onto the pile of your clothes. Your possessions, along with the clothes you are wearing, will be taken for purification. The clerk drones, reciting a speech he has clearly given thousands of times. They will be returned to you upon your release, should you be released. This process of purification, you know, is one of the lazaretto's primary functions. The island wasn't just for quarantining people, it was for quarantining things. Authorities correctly have crudely understood that the plague could travel on objects, especially fabrics. Every bolt of silk, every bale of cotton that arrived in Venice from a suspect port was brought here to be aired out and fumigated in these long warehouses. The process was painstaking. Items were hung on lines and exposed to the smoke of juniper and rosemary fires for days on end. Some were repeatedly doused in vinegar. Even letters from the outside world were considered dangerous. You've heard how they are pierced with small holes held with tongs over a smoking brazier and spritzed with vinegar before being delivered, the ink often running into an illegible smudge. A perfect metaphor for your connection to home. Historians still argue about the true efficacy of these fumigation techniques. Was it the heat and acidic vinegar that actually killed the pestilence, or was the real benefit simply the act of isolating materials for 40 days, allowing the invisible seeds of the plague to naturally die off, with all the smoke and ceremony providing little more than a ritualistic, psychological comfort? The guard bundles up your clothes, your satchel, and your little wooden bird into a large canvas sheet. He hauls the bundle away, and with it goes the last shred of your former self. You are now possessionless. Your final indignity awaits. Before you are given your new uniform, you must be cleansed. Two other men appear carrying wooden buckets. You are treated to the island's premier spa experience, which consists of being doused with buckets of shockingly cold, vinegar-laced water. One of the men then scrubs you down with a block of harsh lye soap and a stiff, bristled brush that feels like it's scraping off the top layer of your skin. It is a brutal, efficient, and entirely non-consensual bath. Finally dripping and shivering, you are handed your new clothes. It is a single shapeless tunic made of a coarse brownish-gray fabric that feels like sackcloth. It's a one-size-fits-all poorly sort of affair hanging loosely on your frame. The color is a fetching shade of dreary, and the fabric has the texture of an angry cat. It's the height of Lazaretto fashion this season. You pull the rough garment over your head. It's itchy and smells faintly of lye. You stand there barefoot on the cold stone floor, your hair plastered to your head, clad in the drab, anonymous uniform of the quarantine. You have been cataloged, stripped, scrubbed, and redressed. You are no longer you. You are an inmate, a number in a ledger. Your identity has been confiscated as efficiently as your clothes. The clerk dismisses you with a curt nod, his attention already returning to the ledger on his desk. You have been successfully processed. The guard who watched you shiver through your vinegar bath now grips your arm and leads you out of the processing room through a different door, one that opens onto the island itself. You step out into the open air, and for the first time, you get a proper look at your new home. You are barefoot, and the ground is a mixture of packed earth and sharp gravel that bites at the soles of your feet with every step. The island is laid out like a grim checkerboard. Long, identical buildings, the Tizic stretch out in severe, unforgiving rows, separated by wide-open corridors of dirt. The only break in the monotony is the colossal form of the Tayson Grande, the great warehouse, which dominates the center of the island. Over 100 meters long, it's a beast of a building, a cathedral dedicated to commerce and contagion control. It's a testament to the Venetian Republic's immense power, a statement that they could not only halt the world's trade, but also build a structure big enough to house it while it was being purified. Its sheer scale makes you feel incredibly small and insignificant. The air is thick with competing smells, the clean, briny scent of the lagoon, the damp, earthy smell of the ground, and a constant underlying haze of wood smoke from the fumigation sheds. It's the island's signature perfume, and everywhere there are people, dozens of them all dressed in the same drab, ill-fitting tunic you now wear. They drift through the open spaces like ghosts. Some huddle in small groups whispering. Others sit alone, their backs against the brick walls, staring at nothing. A few pace relentlessly back and forth, walking a path worn into the dirt by countless others before them. You see the whole spectrum of human misery in their postures: fear, boredom, despair, and a profound soul-deep numbness. You are one of them now, a member of this sad, gray fraternity. The guard leads you past these spectral figures, his boots crunching on the gravel. He doesn't seem to see them. They, in turn, barely seem to notice you, their eyes so dull and vacant, you might as well be invisible. He stops before one of the residential buildings identical to all the others. He pulls a large iron key from his belt, unlocks a heavy wooden door, and shoves it open with a creak. He nudges you forward into the gloom within. This is your new world. It is a small rectangular cell, perhaps 10 feet by 12. The walls are rough, damp stone, weeping a thin film of moisture that glistens in the weak light. The floor is packed earth-cold and solid under your bare feet. High up on the back wall is a single small window, no bigger than a book. It's crossed with two thick iron bars. It offers no view of the lagoon or the city, only a frustratingly small patch of pale, indifferent sky. The furnishings are minimal. To say the decor is Spartan would be an insult to the Spartans, who at least had shields and spears to liven things up. The design here is more early miserable, a bold choice in home decor. Along the walls are four simple wooden platforms raised just a few inches off the floor. On each rests a pallet of what you assume is straw, so thin and compressed it looks more like a dirty smudge than a mattress. A single threadbare blanket is folded at the foot of each. In the far corner sits a wooden bucket. You immediately understand its purpose. It's the ensuite facility. You decide to mentally name it the unpleasantness. There is nothing else. No table, no stool, no hook on the wall, just stone straw and a bucket. As your eyes adjust to the dimness, you realize the cell is not empty. Three other figures, three other men in gray tunics occupy the space. One is lying on his pallet facing the wall. Another is sitting up, his knees drawn to his chest. The third is standing near the back wall, staring up at the tiny barred window. They all turn to look at you as you enter. No one says welcome. No one offers you a slice of cake. The social committee here is really dropping the ball. The door slams shut behind you. The sound is shockingly loud in the small space. It's followed by the heavy metallic thud of the bolt being shot home. The finality of that sound is absolute. You are locked in. You stand awkwardly just inside the door, the new arrival, the intruder. The man sitting on the pallet looks you up and down, his expression unreadable, before turning his gaze back to the floor. You let your own eyes wander around your stone box. The walls are covered in marks left by previous generations of captives. You can see names and dates scratched into the stone. There are crude drawings of ships' crosses and other stranger symbols. You spot a five-pointed star, a pentagram carved near your assigned empty pallet. It's an old apotropaic mark, a folk magic symbol meant to trap demons or ward off evil. It seems a previous resident tried to set up their own spiritual security system. Looking at the grim state of the room, it clearly didn't work. Historians still argue about the social structure within these shared cells. Was it a survival of the fittest environment where the strong dominated the weak, or did the shared experience of uncertainty and confinement often lead to the formation of strong, supportive bonds and makeshift families? Looking at the three silent, wary strangers you are now trapped with, you have no idea which it will be. You take a hesitant step towards the one empty pallet. It's yours now. This small patch of floor, this pathetic pile of straw, is your designated space in the world for the next 40 days. The shock of your arrest, the shame of the cart ride, the humiliation of being stripped and scrubbed, all of it recedes, replaced by a new immediate reality. You are trapped in a stone box with three complete strangers, and the sun is beginning to set. Your sentence has truly begun. The silence in the cell is a thick, heavy blanket. It's broken only by the sound of your own breathing and the distant, mournful cry of a gull from beyond the walls. The bolt on the door is a full stop on your life. You stand there for a long moment, a statue of disbelief, until the cold from the stone floor seeps into the soles of your feet, reminding you that this is real. You slowly make your way to the one empty pallet, a small territory of straw that is now yours. You sit down, the rough fabric of your new tunic scratching your skin. The vibe in the room is less, let's form a team and work together, and more, I will trade you for a crust of bread at the first opportunity. It's a real bonding experience. Finally, the man who was sitting with his knees to his chest lets out a long, weary sigh, breaking the spell. Another one for the collection, he says, his voice a low rumble. He looks at you, his eyes narrowed. He is broad-shouldered and his skin is tanned to the color of old leather, with lines etched around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. What's your crime? Did you look at a chicken the wrong way? You're taken aback by the directness of the question. A rash, you say, your voice barely a whisper, on my arm. The man snorts a sound of bitter amusement. A rash. Of course. They'll take you for a bloody sneeze these days. He extends a hand. Johnny. Sailor? You shake it. His grip is firm, his hand calloused and rough. Got picked up off a carrack from Alexandria 2 weeks ago. A bit of a cough in the crew and they condemned the whole ship. We never even touched the dock. The older man, who had been lying on his pallet, pushes himself up to a sitting position with a groan. He is soft and fleshy, with a pale face that looks like it has never endured a day of hard labor. His gray tunic is already rumpled and stained, and he wears an expression of perpetual deep offense. It is an outrage, he announces to the room, his voice wheezy. I am a respectable merchant, Lorenzo Bellini. My family has supplied the finest damask to the Doge's own household, and I am thrown in here like a common vagrant because my new assistant, a treacherous little worm from Genoa, I knew I never should have trusted him, claimed I had a miasmatic pallor. A pallor I've always been pale. Johnny the sailor rolls his eyes so far back you can almost see the whites. Everyone's got a story, Lorenzo. Lorenzo seems more upset about the potential financial impact than the, actual plague. A man of principle. My shipments will be rotting on the docks. The paperwork alone, it's a catastrophe. This strange cross-section of society is in itself a testament to what your city has become. Venice was always a melting pot, a place where a sailor reeking of foreign spices could pass a silk-clad merchant on the same bridge as a local craftsman. It was a global crossroads, and now the Lazaretto has become its own compressed version of that world, a place where social status is stripped away, leaving only the shared title of suspect. You look past the two men to the fourth occupant of the cell. In the deepest shadow on the pallet, farthest from the door, sits a woman. You hadn't been able to see her clearly before. She is younger than the men, perhaps around your own age, with dark hair pulled back severely from her face. She is just sitting there, her hands clasped in her lap, watching all of you with large dark eyes that seem to absorb the light. She hasn't made a sound. And her, you ask, quietly nodding in her direction. Johnny shrugs. She was here when I arrived. Name's Katerina, I think I heard a guard say. Doesn't talk. At all. Lorenzo shudders theatrically. It's unnatural. Who knows what sickness she's hiding? They shouldn't put women in with men. It's improper. Johnny the sailor gives a short, sharp rap with his knuckles on the stone wall beside him, a strange, reflexive gesture. He sees you notice. Habit, he says gruffly. On a ship, you knock on wood for luck. Here. Stone is all we've got. He's a man governed by the superstitions of the sea, a world of folk beliefs designed to impose some small order on a life of chaos. He probably believes a black cat is good luck, and that whistling can conjure a storm quirky beliefs that seem as useful as any official medicine right now. As you sit there, the initial introductions or lack thereof paint a picture of your new family. Johnny, the cynical veteran, Lorenzo, the entitled merchant, and Katerina, the silent, unsettling mystery. Her silence is a vacuum into which you pour all your own fears. Is she sick? Is she mad with grief? Is she simply defiant? Historians still argue about the demographics of the Lazarettos. While official records focus on mariners like Gianni and merchants like Lorenzo, whose confinement impacted trade, how many local Venetians, women like Katerina, artisans like you, the poor, the unlucky, were swept up in these dragnets based on a neighbor's whisper, their stories almost completely lost to history? Looking at her still form, you feel you're seeing one of those lost stories in the flesh. So a rash, Johnny says, returning to you. Doesn't itch, no fever, no spots in the armpit or groin. No nothing, you insist. I feel perfectly fine. That's what everyone says. He grunts, but there's no malice in it. It's just a statement of fact. We're all fine until we're not. You just have to wait. The sliver of light from the high window begins to fade, turning from pale gray to a deep bruised purple. The outlines of your cellmates soften their forms, melting into the growing darkness. The conversation dies away, the energy of the room dissipating with the light. You are left in near total blackness, acutely aware of the three other breathing bodies in the cramped space. One of them, Lorenzo, is sniffling softly. From the corner you hear a faint rustle, Katerina, shifting on her straw pallet. Outside, the world has disappeared. Inside, you are trapped for the first of 40 nights with these three strangers, your fates now hopelessly, terrifyingly intertwined. You wake up not to the familiar, gentle light of dawn filtering through your attic window, but to a violent, jarring clang. A bell. Somewhere on the island, a guard is ringing a large bronze bell with a furious, insistent rhythm. It's a sound that doesn't invite you to wake, it commands you. The weak light from the high-barred window shows the cell's other occupants are already stirring their movements, stiff and reluctant. Your back aches from the lumpy straw and the hard wooden platform. It was a sleep filled with anxious dreams, and it has offered no rest. Before you can even fully process where you are, the heavy bolt on the door scrapes back. A guard, his face a mask of bored indifference, appears in the doorway. He doesn't say good morning. He just points at the waste bucket in the corner. Johnny sits up, rubs his face, and then looks directly at you. Newcomer's duty, he grunts. There it is. Your first official job in this new society. Lorenzo pinches his nose and turns his face to the wall in disgust. Katerina simply watches you with her usual unnerving stillness. There's no point arguing. You stumble over to the corner, hoist the heavy sloshing bucket, and follow the guard's pointing finger. He leads you to a designated sluice at the end of the building, a stone channel that empties directly into the lagoon. The task is vile and humiliating. As you pour the contents out, you feel like you are pouring away another piece of yourself. This is what you are now, the man who empties the bucket. You return to the cell just as the bell clangs again. This time, the guards herd you and your cellmates out into the wide, dusty corridor between the buildings. A cart is being wheeled along, and two men are distributing the morning meal. There are no plates, no pleasantries. One man shoves a small, dense loaf of dark bread into your hand. It's heavy like a rock and the color of mud. The other man ladles a measure of murky liquid into a tin cup that you are expected to share with your cellmates. You get a quick sip before passing it to Johnny. It's thin, watery wine, so diluted it barely has any flavor. Lorenzo the merchant holds his bread as if it's a venomous toad. In my home, he declares, to no one in particular, we would use a loaf this hard to scour the pots after a stew. Johnny, taking a large bite and chewing with grim determination, mutters back, good. You can start with the bucket then. After this meager breakfast, the real business of the day begins. And the business of the day is nothing. Absolutely nothing. The cell doors are left open, and you, along with the other 100 or so inmates from your block, are left to occupy the vast, empty space of the yard. The schedule is packed. From now until midday, the main activity is milling about aimlessly. Later this afternoon, you suspect will be advanced staring at a wall. The sheer crushing boredom is an enemy all its own. You see how the others fight it. Some, like Gianni, find a spot to sit and observe their faces impassive. Others pace, walking the same 10-yard stretch of ground over and over their bodies, desperate for a purpose. Small groups whisper amongst themselves, exchanging rumors or stories. A pair of younger boys scratches a grid in the dirt for a game of nine men's Morris using pebbles as pieces. Lorenzo complains. Katerina finds a place in the shade of a wall, sinks to the ground, and becomes utterly still, a study in silent endurance. The diet here is typical of institutions of the time designed for subsistence, not satisfaction. Bread was the cornerstone of life for everyone, but the quality varied immensely. The hard, dark loaf in your hand is a world away from the soft, white bread of the wealthy. This is survival fuel and nothing more. The watered-down wine is also standard. It was called vinello, and in a world with questionable water sources, adding a bit of wine was a basic safety precaution. Some physicians even prescribed special plague wines infused with herbs like wormwood or sage, believing they could purify the body's humors. You doubt your drink has any such special properties. It tastes mostly of water and disappointment. Just as you feel yourself sinking into a state of numb lethargy, the bell rings again. Midday. The guards reappear and herd everyone back into their cells. The doors are bolted. This apparently is nap time, or in Lorenzo's case, complaint time. The midday lockdown lasts for what feels like an eternity. Then another bell. The doors open. You are released back into the yard for the afternoon session of your new routine. The sun is high and hot now, beating down on the treeless expanse. The shade is all claimed. The boredom returns, this time accompanied by a drowsy, heat-induced listlessness. Historians still argue about the degree of freedom allowed within the lazarettos. Were inmates perpetually locked in cells, as some accounts imply, or were they allowed to mingle in common yards for much of the day? The reality you're beginning to understand was likely a tedious blend of both long stretches of forced mingling in a controlled space punctuated by periods of being locked away. It's a rhythm designed to break the spirit as much as to contain the disease. Finally, as the sun begins its descent toward the horizon, the bell rings for the last time. The dinner cart appears. It is a thrilling variation on breakfast, in that it's the exact same loaf of bread and the exact same ladle of watery wine. The culinary innovation here is truly breathtaking. You eat your rock-like loaf, your throat dry. As dusk settles, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that you can only glimpse as a sliver of color from the yard, the guards herd you back into the cells for the final lockdown. The heavy door shuts. The bolt slides home. You are plunged into darkness. You lie on your pallet, every bone in your body aching with a unique combination of fatigue and utter inactivity. You have survived day one. You have learned the rhythm of the lazaretto, the bells, the bread, the bolts, the boredom. And then the truly terrifying thought lands cold and heavy in the pit of your stomach. You have to do this 39 more times. The darkness in the cell is absolute. It's a physical presence, a thick velvety blackness that presses in on you, muffling the world. After the rigid bell-governed structure of the day, the night is a formless, terrifying void. You lie on your straw pallet, every muscle tense. Sleep feels like a distant country you've been exiled from. You try counting sheep, but they all seem to be coughing. It's not very relaxing. At first, the only sounds are the ones inside your stone box. They are the sounds of life, small and intimate. From the pallet next to yours, you hear Gianni the sailor breathing a deep and steady rhythm. Across the cell, Lorenzo the merchant snores softly, a faint wheezing whistle like a tiny dying accordion. It's an annoying sound, but also a strangely reassuring one. It means he's alive. From the corner where Katerina lies, there is only silence. An unnerving, complete silence that makes you wonder if she breathes at all. Over it all, you can hear the frantic, rabbit-fast thumping of your own heart. But as you lie there straining your senses in the dark, you begin to hear the sounds from beyond your walls. The night air, you discover, is not silent at all. It carries sounds with a horrifying clarity. The entire island is a vast instrument, and it is playing a symphony of sickness. The percussion section is the coughing. It starts with a single dry bark from a cell 2 doors down. It's a lonely, hesitant sound. Then another cough answers from across the yard, this one deeper, wetter, more phlegmy. Soon it's a scattered chorus. Hacking coughs, gentle coughs, racking coughs that sound like they are tearing a person apart from the inside. Each one is a question mark, a flare sent up in the dark. Is it just a simple cold, or is it the beginning? You find yourself holding your own breath, a tightness in your chest, terrified that you might involuntarily join the choir. Then comes the string section, the weeping. It's not loud wailing grief. It's the quiet, suppressed sound of pure despair. A man in a nearby cell is crying, his sobs muffled, trying not to be heard. But in the dead of night, the sound carries. He is mourning something: his family, his freedom, his health. It is the most human and heartbreaking sound in the world, the sound of a spirit breaking. And weaving through it all is the chanting, the low, monotonous murmur of prayer. From several cells, you can hear the soft drone of Latin. Pater Noster, quies in caelis, Ave Maria, gratia plena. It rises and falls, a constant, desperate hum. For the people in this place, faith is the last line of defense. The plague was almost universally understood, not as a medical phenomenon, but as a divine one. The flagellum Dei, the scourge of God, a punishment for the sins of humanity. Prayer, therefore, was not merely a comfort. It was considered the most potent form of medicine, a direct appeal to the only physician who mattered. This is the sound of people trying to bargain with God for their lives. It's a collaborative musical performance where all the instruments are various forms of human misery. It's not going to be a chart topper. Suddenly, a new sound cuts through the symphony, sharp and ugly. A shout. It's followed by the unmistakable sound of a heavy door bolt being thrown back with force. The sound is close. You hear the low, urgent voices of guards, and then a brief, terrified scream that is quickly stifled. There's a scuffle, the sound of a body being dragged across a stone floor. Then more urgent whispers, the heavy slam of the door, and the definitive thud of the bolt shooting home. And then, silence. The coughing and the praying in the nearby cells have all stopped. Everyone is listening. Everyone heard it. Someone has been taken from their cell in the middle of the night. Taken where? To the Lazaretto Vecchio, the island of the dying, to a freshly dug pit on the far side of the island. The not knowing is the worst part. The authorities don't announce these things. People just disappear. In this new ringing silence, you become aware of another kind of sound, the absence of it. In an environment where breathing, coughing, and movement are the only signs of life, a sudden lack of sound from a neighboring cell can be as alarming as a scream. This is the island's most quirky and terrifying auditory trick. You might get used to hearing a man cough all night, and the moment you no longer hear him, a cold dread washes over you. You find yourself straining to hear him, praying for him to cough again, just so you know he's still there. Historians still argue about the psychological impact of this constant auditory exposure to sickness. Did it lead to a normalization of suffering, a numbing of empathy required for survival? Or did it foster a heightened state of anxiety and paranoia that could in itself weaken the spirit and make one more susceptible to illness? Lying here, your nerves frayed, your mind painting pictures for every sound you hear, you are willing to bet on the paranoia. The night wears on a slow torture of sound and silence. You do not sleep. You listen. You catalog the symphony of coughing, weeping, praying, and the sudden terrifying disappearances. You feel like you are lying at the bottom of a deep, dark well, and all the misery of the world is trickling down the sides. Eventually, after an eternity, the absolute black of the cell begins to soften. A faint, ghostly gray light appears in the small barred window. Dawn is coming. The night is over. But you are not the same person who lay down hours ago. You are now haunted not by ghosts, but by the sounds of the living waiting to die. The morning bell rings its clang, echoing in the still pre-dawn air. Another day begins. You have been on the island for nearly a week now, and the bleak rhythm of bells and bread has become a grimly familiar lullaby. The symphony of sickness at night, the oppressive boredom by day, it's all you know now. But today, something is different. After the morning meal of hard bread and watery wine, the guards don't leave the cell doors open. They order everyone back inside and slam the bolts home. An unusual midday lockdown. A ripple of anxiety passes through the yard. Any break in the routine is a cause for fear. A few minutes later, a guard appears at your door, peering through the small grill. The physician is making his rounds, he announces. Stay put. The air in your cell immediately becomes thick with tension. Lorenzo the merchant begins to sweat his face, turning even paler than usual. He starts muttering prayers, his hands trembling. Johnny sits up straight on his pallet, his face a stony mask, but you see a new watchfulness in his eyes. Katerina, for her part, remains unchanged, a small still point in the swirling anxiety of the room. You feel a knot of ice form in your stomach. Your rash has faded slightly, but it's still there, a faint pinkish stain on your forearm. You instinctively pull your sleeve down. An hour passes. The wait is excruciating. Finally, you hear footsteps approaching. Your door is unbolted and two men step inside, followed by a guard. The first man is not a beak-plagued doctor. He is a gentleman dressed in the dark, sober robes of a scholar, a velvet cap on his head. He looks fastidiously clean, profoundly out of place, and deeply unhappy to be here. He looks less like a man ready to battle a deadly epidemic and more like a university librarian who has taken a very wrong turn and is too proud to ask for directions. This is the physician. His assistant, a younger man with the muscular forearms of a barber surgeon, carries a wooden case of instruments and a stack of glass flasks. The physician consults a list on a roll of parchment. The bookbinder's apprentice, he says, his voice crisp and academic. He looks at you. Present yourself. You stumble forward. This is the moment. The examination that follows has nothing to do with the methods you might expect. It is a practical application of a medical theory that has dominated Western medicine for 2,000 years, the theory of the four humors. The core belief is simple. Your body is a container for four vital fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health is achieved when these humors are in perfect balance. Sickness, from a common cold to the great pestilence itself, is the result of an imbalance, an excess, or deficiency of one of these fluids. The doctor's task is not to cure a disease, but to rebalance a person. He begins by taking your pulse, his cool, dry fingers pressing against your wrist. He closes his eyes in concentration, not just counting the beats, but assessing their character. He murmurs to his assistant, "The pulse is wiry and swift." Next, he orders you to provide a urine sample in one of the glass flasks. This is the centerpiece of the diagnosis. The assistant hands you a flask and gestures to the waste bucket. With as much dignity as you can muster, you comply. The physician takes the flask from you, handling it with a cloth. You've never had someone look at your pee with such intense, scholarly concentration. He holds it up to the sliver of light from the window, swirling the contents gently, like a master vintner sampling a rare wine. You half expect him to comment on its notes of despair with a slightly nutty finish. He is performing uroscopy, comparing the color clarity and sediment of your water to an internal memorized chart. "Ah," he says, a flicker of triumphant diagnosis in his eyes. "As I suspected, highly choleric." He explains that your urine is too yellow, a clear sign of an excess of yellow bile, the hot and dry humor. He then inspects your tongue, your eyes, and asks you a series of bizarre questions. Are you prone to fits of anger? Is your stool typically loose or firm? What foods do you crave? You answer truthfully, completely bewildered. He nods sagely, as if each answer confirms his theory. He never once asked to see the rash that landed you here. It is an irrelevant, uninteresting symptom compared to the grand theoretical drama playing out in your humors. After his investigation, he steps back and pronounces his verdict. The patient displays a clear choleric imbalance. His temperament is hot and dry. This excess of yellow bile creates a pestilential susceptibility. So the good news is he completely ignored the rash that got you locked up in the first place. The bad news is he thinks your personality is too dry and your pee is too angry. You can't decide if this is a medical diagnosis or just a very harsh review of your character. His prescription is logical within his flawed framework. To counteract your excess heat and dryness, you must be subjected to cold and moisture. A diet of cooling foods, he instructs his assistant, who makes a note. Lettuces, cucumber, melon, if they can be procured. And he is to be prepared for a phlebotomy in 2 days' time. A modest bleeding from the basilic vein should suffice to cool the blood. And with that, your fate is sealed. You are to be bled. Historians still argue about the mindset of these Renaissance physicians. Were they cynical charlatans knowingly practicing useless medicine, or were they sincere, educated men working diligently within a completely flawed but internally consistent scientific paradigm, genuinely believing they were helping. Watching this man with his absolute unshakable confidence, you suspect it's the latter, which is somehow even more terrifying. He turns his attention to Lorenzo, who looks as though he's about to faint. You retreat to your pallet, your head spinning. You came here because of a mark on your skin, but you are being judged by the color of your urine and the heat of your temper. Your well-being is in the hands of a man who is trying to fix a faulty machine with a manual written in a dead language for a completely different machine. And in 2 days, he is going to try and fix you by letting some of your life force spill out onto the stone floor. A week has passed, 7 days. You know this because you have started to keep a record. Using a sharp-edged pebble you found in the yard, you have scratched 7 straight vertical lines onto the stone wall next to your pallet. 7 down, 33 to go. This small secret calendar is your only anchor in a sea of formless time. It is a tiny act of rebellion against the crushing sameness of your existence. The initial shock of your arrival has worn off, replaced by a much more insidious enemy, the relentless, grinding monotony. The daily rhythm of bells and bread, which was at first so jarring, has now become a kind of torture. Your mind, accustomed to the intricate and demanding work of tooling leather and stitching vellum, has nothing to engage with. It has been put out of a job, and in its forced idleness, it is beginning to turn on itself. Boredom, you are discovering, is not a passive state. It is an active corrosive acid that eats away at your thoughts. Your world has shrunk to the size of your cell and the dusty yard outside, and you find your focus shrinking with it. You spend an entire morning watching a single spider spin a web in the corner of the ceiling. You know the precise number of stones in the wall opposite your pallet. You've become a leading expert on the geology of your particular section of the wall. You're thinking of publishing a paper on it titled, "Grayish Rocks I Have Known and Stared At." These are the new highlights of your life. The main event yesterday was a fight between 2 pigeons over a crust of bread. It was thrilling. You're considering starting a betting pool for the rematch. With the boredom comes a creeping, venomous paranoia. You have become a frantic detective of your own body. Every phantom itch on your arm sends a jolt of ice through your veins. You stifle every cough, analyze every ache. You start watching your cellmates with a new fearful intensity. Johnny's cough, is it really just from the sea air, or is it getting deeper? Lorenzo has moved past complaining and has entered a new phase of just quietly weeping into his bread at mealtimes. Does his sadness stem from his lost business, or is it the telltale sign of the humoral imbalance of melancholy, a precursor to the plague? And Katerina. Her silence is the most terrifying symptom of all. What disease festers in a body that refuses to speak? The person you were a week ago feels like a stranger. You look at your hands. These were the hands of an apprentice, skilled and steady. They knew the feel of paper, the weight of a bone folder, the precise pressure needed to apply gold leaf. Now they are just hands, idle, useless, and starting to grow soft. Without your work, your tools, your name, your identity is dissolving like a poorly made ink in the rain. The church fathers had a name for this state of soul-crushing despair and listlessness. Excedia. Often translated as sloth, it was considered one of the 7 deadly sins, a spiritual sickness that was said to particularly afflict monks in the endless quiet of their monasteries. It was the noonday demon that drained the will to live, work, or pray. You are not in a monastery, but you understand this demon intimately. It is the demon of the perpetually ringing bell of the endlessly repeated day. You all develop little tics, small rituals to keep the demon at bay. Johnny has unraveled a thread from the hem of his blanket and is constantly obsessively tying and untying complex sailor's knots. Lorenzo has found a smooth, dark pebble in the yard and spends hours polishing it with his thumb as if it were a rare black pearl. Katerina methodically picks at the fabric of her tunic, arranging the tiny pieces of lint into neat little piles. And you have your 7 scratches on the wall. They are your anchor, your proof that time is in fact still passing. Historians still argue about the mental health consequences of quarantine. Was the madness or despair sometimes noted in lazaretto records a direct result of the psychological pressures of confinement, or was it often a neurological symptom of diseases like typhus or high fevers that were rampant in such close quarters? From your perspective, the environment itself is a disease, one that attacks the mind, as surely as the plague attacks the body. The dread of the physician's sentence hangs over you. The phlebotomy, the bleeding is scheduled for tomorrow. The thought of it, of being intentionally wounded in this place, adds another layer to your anxiety. Your mind, with nothing else to do, replays the physician's visit, his bizarre pronouncements about your choleric nature. You retreat into memories, recalling the smell of your master's workshop with an aching clarity. You can almost feel the smooth leather under your fingertips. Then your imagination swings to the future, conjuring vivid images of the barber surgeon's knife, of your own blood spilling onto the dirty floor. The borders between memory reality and fearful fantasy are starting to fray. As the guard bolts the door for the night, you go to your wall. You take out your sharp pebble to scratch the 8th line of mark for the day that has just ended. You press the stone to the wall, ready to make your mark. And then you freeze. You stare at the 7 lines. Was it 7 or was it 6? Did you make a mark this morning, or was that yesterday? A wave of dizziness and confusion washes over you. For a terrifying moment you cannot remember. The days are blurring together into one long gray smear. Your anchor is dragging, and your mind, your most precious tool, is beginning to come apart. The morning arrives not with the symphony of sickness you've grown accustomed to, but with a heavy personal silence. It is the 8th day, the day of your phlebotomy. The dread you felt last night has settled in your stomach like a cold stone. You manage to choke down your morning bread, your throat tight with anxiety. Every time you hear a guard's footsteps, you expect them to be for you. Out in the yard under the pale morning sun, you try to distract yourself. But your fear is a magnet pulling your thoughts back to the impending appointment with the barber surgeon. You are so lost in your own world of worry that you almost don't notice when Johnny nudges you hard. Watch, he whispers, his eyes fixed on a point across the yard. You follow his gaze. Near the wall of the great warehouse, 2 men are standing close together. One of them, a gaunt figure with a desperate look, furtively passes his entire bread ration to the other, a larger, more confident-looking man. The larger man takes the bread breaks off a small piece and hands it back. He then whispers something in the gaunt man's ear. The exchange is over in seconds. The gaunt man shuffles away, clutching his tiny piece of bread like a holy relic. What was that, you ask? That Johnny says, a flicker of something like respect in his voice, is business. Welcome to the real Lazaretto. He begins to explain. The guards and the physician control the official island, the one of bells and rations and diagnoses. But within that framework, the inmates have created their own world, their own society with its own economy. It's a secret, desperate, and utterly human system built on the principle that everything has a price. The array of goods for sale is dazzling. You can get a slightly used pebble, a string of indeterminate origin, or a rumor that's only been passed through 6 other people. It's like the Rialto market if everyone at the Rialto was miserable and selling trash. The primary currency, Johnny explains, is bread. The daily ration is the gold standard against which all else is measured. A man too sick to eat or too scared of the future might trade his loaf for something he needs more. And what can you buy? Information is a top commodity. News from a new arrival about the state of the city is worth at least 2 loaves. The name of a guard who might turn a blind eye for a moment costs a half loaf. Then there's contraband, a nail carefully pried from a loose floorboard that can be used as a tool. A relatively clean strip of linen, perfect for a bandage. Services are also for sale. A woman in another block is known for her skill in mending the rough tunics. Her price is a quarter loaf per tier. This kind of illicit economy, Johnny tells you, is as old as confinement itself. Wherever a system fails to provide for all of human needs, the need for more food, for information, for a tiny comfort, for hope, another system will spring up in its place. As you absorb this, you realize with a jolt that you have something to trade. A skill. You know how to work with paper thread and leather. You can mend things. You could offer to rebind someone's soul-crushing despair into a more manageable pocket-sized edition. This knowledge, useless for the past week, suddenly has value. And you need something. You need to know what's about to happen to you. I need to know about the bleeding, you tell Johnny. What is it like? Johnny considers this. Information like that has a price, he says. Costs half a loaf. Your dinner tonight. You agree immediately. A few hours of hunger is a small price to pay to quiet the screaming unknowns in your head. Johnny acts as your guide, leading you to one of the unofficial brokers of the yard, a man named Rocco, who seems to know everyone. Johnny explains the deal. Rocco nods, then goes to find a man who was bled 3 days ago. The man, a Venetian weaver with tired eyes, agrees to talk. The deal is struck. You have sold your dinner for a story. The barber surgeon, his name is Pietro, the weaver tells you in a low voice. He's quick. He has you make a fist, finds the vein in your arm. He uses a lancet, a small pointed knife. It's sharp, so the cut itself is not so bad. It's the feeling of the blood. It's warm, and it just flows out. He takes about a cup full into a small bowl. Then he puts a pad on it and wraps it tight. It's over in a minute. The information doesn't make the idea pleasant, but it strips it of its monstrous imaginary qualities. It becomes a known quantity, a procedure. It seems a bit steep to pay half your dinner just to be told that getting cut with a knife is going to hurt, but the reduction in pure terror feels worth it. Historians still argue about the role of guards in these illicit economies. Were they active participants smuggling goods and profiting from the misery? Or did they practice a form of malicious compliance, turning a blind eye to the petty bartering because it kept the inmates occupied and less likely to riot? Looking at the guards staring blankly from the watchtower, you suspect it's the latter. Even the island's priest is part of the system. You see him consoling a wealthy-looking man who tearfully presses something into the priest's hand. Was it a promise of a donation to the church in exchange for an extra mass said on his behalf in the economy of salvation? A rich man's soul was always worth more. Some even said the priest sold blessed threads to tie around a wrist to ward off fever, a strange and quirky blend of official faith and folk magic. The morning wears on. You feel a shift inside you. By participating in this secret market, you have ceased to be merely a passive victim waiting for the next bell. You are now a player, however small, in the complex social game of the island. You have made a choice. You have exerted a tiny measure of control over your fate. It's a fragile, desperate kind of agency, but it feels like a lungful of fresh air. You know the barber surgeon is still coming for you, but now when he arrives, you will be an informed consumer. The day after your phlebotomy is a haze of soreness and lightheadedness. The barber surgeon Pietro was exactly as the weaver had described, swift, impersonal, and efficient. The cut on the inside of your elbow is wrapped in a tight linen bandage, a dull throb, a constant reminder of the cure you endured. Lorenzo looked at you this morning and declared that you look even paler, which according to his extensive medical knowledge is a very bad sign. You feel weaker, not stronger. The physician's attempt to cool your hot humors has only succeeded in making you feel drained and cold. Life settles back into its monotonous rhythm. You do your chores, you eat your bread, you trade a bit of information you overheard for a promise of a less splintery section of a floorboard someone found. You are becoming a citizen of this bleak little nation, the days blur marked only by the scratch you add to your wall each night. Then one afternoon, about 2 weeks into your sentence, a different kind of call echoes across the yard. It's not a bell. It's a guard walking through the milling crowd shouting a single electrifying word. Letter A. Mail. The effect is instantaneous. A jolt of pure, uncut hope shoots through the lethargic crowd. People who were slumped against walls stand up straight. Quiet conversations stop mid-sentence. Heads turn eyes wide with a desperate, hungry light. The word mail causes more excitement than if the guards announce free wine and an early release. It's a reminder that being remembered is more valuable than almost anything. A letter is proof that you still exist in the world beyond the wall, that you have not yet been forgotten. A clerk emerges from the main building carrying a small leather pouch. He sets himself up at a wooden table in the yard, and the inmates surge forward, forming a desperate, jostling crowd. He begins calling out names. Each name is a small miracle. A man next to you weeps with unabashed joy when his name is called. Another man whose name is not called slumps away, his face a mask of bitter disappointment. You wait, your heart hammering, scanning the small pile of letters on the table, praying to see one addressed to you. Apprentice bookbinder. The clerk calls out, not bothering with your name. You push your way forward, your hand outstretched. He hands you a single sheet of folded paper. It does not look or feel like a normal letter. The first thing that hits you is the smell, a sharp, acrid reek of vinegar, layered over the faint, ghostly scent of burnt rosemary. The paper itself is stiff and warped as if it has been soaked and dried. And it's full of holes. Not rips or tears, but dozens of tiny deliberate slits and punctures as if it had been stabbed repeatedly with a small knife. This is a purified letter, a product of the Republic's obsessive fear of contagion. You know the process. At the health office in the city, every piece of mail arriving from a suspect location or destined for a lazaretto was subjected to this brutal cleansing. Tongs would hold the paper over a brazier of smoking sulfur and herbs the smoke forced through the slits to kill any lurking pestilence. Then it would be doused or sprinkled with strong vinegar, the 15th century equivalent of a disinfectant wipe. It was a letter that had to be tortured before it could be read. You find a quiet spot by the wall away from the crowd and carefully unfold the stiff, smelly paper. It's from your mother. Her familiar looping script is there, but the ink has bled and feathered from the moisture blurring some words into illegible smudges. You have to squint deciphering the text like an ancient damaged manuscript. My dearest son, it begins. The words leap out at you, a direct message of love from a world you can barely remember. She tells you she is praying to Saint Rash, the patron saint of plague, victims every single day for your safe return. She is well. Your father is well. There is a painful line where she mentions that your master, with his typical lack of sentiment, has already hired a new apprentice to take your place. The news stings more than you expect. You have already been replaced. The letter is a strange cocktail of comfort and pain, each loving sentence a reminder of everything you have lost. You look around. Lorenzo also got a letter. He is holding it at arm's length, squinting. This is outrageous, he sputters. My wife's penmanship is atrocious at the best of times, but this vinegar has rendered half of it complete gibberish. And is this paper made of rags? The woman knows I only use the finest linen stock. He's critiquing the quality of the stationery, while you're just trying to figure out if your aunt is sick or just went to Sicily. Priorities. Johnny did not receive a letter. He stands off to one side, affecting an air of nonchalance, but you see the rigid set of his jaw. Katerina, who didn't even bother to join the crowd, watches the emotional spectacle with her usual detached curiosity. Historians still argue about how much these letters were censored. Were officials just purifying them for health reasons, or were they also reading the mail to monitor morale, gather intelligence on the state of the city, and suppress any news that might cause a panic? Looking at the stab marks on your letter, it's easy to believe both. The practice of using invisible ink like lemon juice was a known trick among spies and illicit lovers. But your mother would know no such tradecraft. Her message is honest, simple, and horribly damaged. You finish reading, your eyes stinging. You don't know if it's from the vinegar fumes or the words themselves. You are left holding this bizarre artifact, this proof of love that had to be stabbed, choked with smoke, and poisoned before it was deemed safe enough to touch you. You fold it carefully along its warped creases, the acrid smell clinging to your fingers. It is now your most precious and most painful possession, a tangible piece of a life that is waiting for you, you hope, on the other side of the wall. The letter from your mother becomes your talisman. In the long, empty hours of the day, you take it out and read it, the acrid smell of vinegar, a familiar perfume. The blurred words are a direct link to a life that now feels like a dream. You trace the shape of your mother's handwriting with your finger, a physical connection to her, and you pray to Saint Rash right alongside her. A few more days pass. The bandage from your phlebotomy comes off, leaving a small, puckered scar on your arm. It feels like a brand the islands mark upon you. The routine grinds on. The black market ebbs and flows. You successfully trade your knowledge of stitching for an extra half ration of bread from a man whose tunic was nearly in two pieces. It's a small victory, a tiny assertion of your own value in this place where you are meant to have none. The dynamic in your cell has settled into a pattern of wary coexistence, and then one evening, the pattern breaks. It starts with Lorenzo. He refuses his dinner, pushing the bread away. This is unusual. For all his complaints, Lorenzo never misses a meal. I have a pounding in my head, he whimpers, clutching his temples, and I feel hot, terribly hot. Johnny, ever the pragmatist, feels his forehead. You're a bit warm, he concedes. You've probably worried yourself into a fever, you old goat. Lorenzo complains of a headache, and Johnny tells him it's just his brain trying to escape the monotony. A noble if futile effort. But as night falls, Lorenzo doesn't settle down. He thrashes on his straw pallet, muttering about bolts of silk and treacherous Genoese assistants. He is delirious. You, Gianni, and Katerina lie on your own pallets, listening a new and specific fear creeping into the cell. This is not the distant anonymous symphony of sickness from across the yard. This is a solo performance, and it is in your room. Sometime in the deepest part of the night, you are jolted awake. Not by Lorenzo, who has fallen into a low guttural moaning, but by a sound at the door. The scrape of the bolt. It is quiet, practiced, and terrifyingly deliberate. Two guards slip inside their movements, swift and silent in the dark. One carries a shuttered lantern, its single beam of light cutting a sharp path through the darkness, making the shadows dance like demons on the walls. They move with a quiet professionalism that is deeply unsettling. It's clear this isn't their first surprise middle-of-the-night eviction for the deliriously ill rodeo. They don't check a list or ask any questions. They go directly to Lorenzo's pallet. The beam of light falls upon his face. His skin is slick with sweat, his eyes are wide and unseeing. He doesn't seem to recognize them. The silk. The watermark is flawed, he mutters. One guard takes him by the shoulders, the other by the feet. They lift him from the pallet. He is limp, offering no resistance. You, Gianni, and Katerina are frozen. You are spectators at a nightmare. You lie perfectly still, barely breathing, your blankets pulled up to your chins like children hiding from a monster. There is nothing to say. There is nothing to do. To interfere would be madness. The guards carry Lorenzo out of the cell as easily as if he were a sack of grain. The door is pulled shut. The bolt slides home. And you are left in the sudden ringing silence and the suffocating darkness, the image of Lorenzo's vacant stare burned into the back of your eyes. For a long time, no one moves. Finally, Johnny's voice cuts through the blackness, low and rough, with a fear he can no longer conceal. They've taken him to the Vecchio. The Lazaretto Vecchio. The old Lazaretto. You've heard the name whispered in the yard. It is the sister island to this one, but it is not a place of suspicion. It is a place of certainty. It is the plague hospital, the final destination. Being sent there is not a transfer, it is a verdict. It is where they send the sick to die, to keep their final contagious moments isolated from the city. The island had its own church, its own graveyard, and its own staff of bikini. Gravediggers who were often convicts offered their freedom if they survived the work. The mortality rate on the Vecchio was not a statistic. It was practically a guarantee. Historians still argue about the diagnostic criteria used to move a person from the suspect, Nuovo, to the condemned, Vecchio. Was it based on the appearance of undisputed symptoms like the buboes, the dark swellings in the groin and armpits? Or could a simple fever, a state of delirium, or even the fearful denunciation of a cellmate be enough to seal a person's fate? Watching Lorenzo, who had no visible marks, be carried away, you realize the criteria are terrifyingly broad. When the morning bell rings and the door is unbolted, the cell feels vast and empty. Lorenzo's pallet is a gaping wound in the room. His thin blanket is still there, crumpled in the shape of his absent body. His presence, once so irritatingly large, has been replaced by a void that is 1,000 times more oppressive. It is a physical manifestation of fear. Well, there's more legroom now. You try to find the silver lining, but it's a very thin, very bleak lining. The three of you move through the morning routine in a daze, avoiding each other's eyes. You are no longer a quartet of wary strangers. You are a trio of survivors, and Lorenzo's empty space is a silent, screaming reminder that the number could shrink again at any time without any warning at all. The empty pallet is a permanent fixture in your life, now a shrine to Lorenzo. In the days following his disappearance, a heavy silence fell upon your cell. No one has been assigned to take his place, so the space remains a constant, tangible reminder of the fragility of your own situation. The dynamic between the three of you has changed. There is a new unspoken solidarity. You are the ones who are still here. When Gianni coughs, you no longer flinch with fear for yourself, but with a flicker of concern for him. It's amazing how a potential brush with death can make you appreciate the little things, like not having to listen to a grown man weep about his thread count. Today is different. You know this from the moment you wake up. You go to the wall and trace the 19 lines you have scratched there. After the morning routine, you find your sharp pebble and carve the 20th line. It is a milestone. Day 20. You are halfway through your sentence. You have climbed to the summit of this dreadful 40-day hill. In theory, everything from here on is downhill. You expect to feel a surge of relief, a wave of elation, But the feeling is murky, a confusing cocktail of fragile hope and profound despair. The hope is a small, warm thing, lighting up a tiny corner of your mind. 20 is a number you can comprehend. You have survived 20 days of this. You can surely survive 20 more. For the first time, you allow yourself to imagine the moment of release, the sound of the Watergate opening, the feeling of the sun on your face as a free man. The vision is so powerful it almost makes you dizzy. But the despair is a cold tide always waiting to rush in and extinguish that little flame. 20 days is still an eternity. It is 20 more nights of the symphony of sickness, 20 more mornings of hard bread, 20 more endless empty afternoons. And Lorenzo's ghost reminds you that the 40-day calendar is a lie. The real clock is the one ticking inside your own body and inside the bodies of everyone around you. Reaching the halfway point means nothing if you are taken away tonight. Johnny, as always, is the voice of grim pragmatism. Halfway there is still halfway from here. He grunts when you mention the milestone. Means nothing until you're on the boat home. You are living with a new kind of time. Back in Venice, time was marked by the rhythm of your work, the church bells for Mass, the festivals of the saints. It was a time that had texture and meaning. Here, time is a weapon used against you. It is a flat, featureless, administrative block of 40 days, a concept as artificial and brutal as the walls around you. It's a measured sentence, a new idea in a world used to the cycles of the seasons. You watch an old man in the yard who has created his own way of fighting back. He has arranged a circle of pebbles and placed a stick in the center, a makeshift sundial. He spends his entire day watching the shadow marking the slow passage of the hours between the bells. It is his small way of reclaiming time, of proving that the sun still follows its ancient, predictable path, even here. That afternoon, feeling a surge of that fragile hope, you decide to do the same. You will make something. You will invest in the future. You take out your mother's letter. It is becoming soft and tattered from your constant handling. Using a thread you carefully pulled from your blanket and a needle you fashioned from a sharpened chicken bone, the price of your story about the phlebotomy, you begin to work. You take a relatively clean scrap of linen you bartered for and fold it carefully, stitching the edges to create a small protective envelope for the letter. It's not your finest work. A chicken bone is a clumsy awl, and your hands are out of practice. But the familiar motion of stitching, of creating, is a comfort. You're now officially the foremost bookbinder/seamster of Cell Block C. A niche market, but you'll take it. As you work, you think about the unstable psychology of this place. Historians of the future will surely argue about the mental turning points of long-term confinement. Is there a halfway crisis where hope and despair collide, or is the process a slow, steady decline into apathy? From where you sit, you know the answer is both. Your mood swings wildly. 1 hour you are planning the first meal you will eat as a free man. The next you are convinced you will die on this island. Your body thrown into a pit of quicklime. You finish your small project just as the sun begins to set. You slide the precious vinegar-scented letter into its new protective sleeve. The act of preservation is an act of defiance. It says, I believe there will be an after. I believe I will survive to read this again. As the bell rings for the final lockdown, you go to your wall. You look at the 20 marks. Halfway. You've survived Lorenzo's disappearance, the physician's bizarre diagnosis, the bleeding, and the 20 days of crushing boredom. You don't feel victorious. You don't feel relieved. You just feel quiet. You are perfectly balanced on the knife edge between hope and hopelessness. You have 20 more days, 20 more chances to fall one way or the other. You touch the 20th scratch mark. It feels heavier than all the others combined. The days after you reach the halfway point are a study in contrast. The fragile hope you felt allows you to breathe a little easier, but the memory of Lorenzo's vacant palate is a constant check on any nascent optimism. The routine continues its relentless march. Then one afternoon, the routine is broken once more. Pietro, the barber surgeon and the physician's assistant, appears at your cell door. He has come to administer the next phase of your treatment. His first order of business is your diet. While Gianni and Caterina are given their standard bread ration, Pietro presents you with your special cooling meal. It is a small wooden bowl containing a handful of wilted brownish lettuce leaves and a few slimy slices of cucumber, all swimming in a pool of sharp-smelling vinegar. You are presented with your prescription meal, a sad pile of wet leaves. It's a bold culinary statement that says, We have given up on flavor and also your will to live. Johnny, seeing the pathetic meal, silently breaks his own loaf in two and pushes a piece across the floor to you. You accept it gratefully. After you have forced down the sad salad, Pietro gets down to business. The physician has reviewed your case. He says, his tone businesslike. While your primary issue is the choleric imbalance, he has authorized a topical remedy to address the surface manifestation. He means your rash. After all this time, they have finally decided to treat the one thing that got you locked up in here. Pietro opens his wooden case. You expect to see more clean linen or perhaps a jar of some herbal salve. Instead, he pulls out a small stoppered clay pot and a little mortar and pestle. He unstoppers the pot and tips a small amount of a fine grayish-brown powder into the mortar. What is that, you ask, your voice betraying your suspicion? Pietro looks at you as if you're a particularly dim-witted child. It is dried toad, he says, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. Of course, dried toad, the latest thing in 15th century skincare. This you vaguely know is a real and popular remedy. The logic of it, as far as you can understand, is based on a kind of sympathetic magic. The plague was seen as a hot, poisonous venom. Toads, being cold, ugly, and supposedly venomous themselves, were believed to be naturally attracted to poison. Therefore, a dried toad, when applied to a plague sore, or in your case a stubborn rash, would naturally draw the poison out of the body. It made a kind of terrifying, nonsensical sense. Pietro adds a splash of vinegar to the powder and begins to mix it with the pestle, creating a thick, gritty, foul-smelling paste. As he works, you think of all the other desperate cures you've heard whispered about in the yard. People swallowing powdered emeralds, believing the gemstone's purity would fight the disease. Wealthy merchants buying hugely expensive drafts of unicorn horn, which was just ground-up narwhal tusk sold by canny northern traders. Compared to that, maybe a toad paste is actually a bargain. Historians still debate the role of these folk remedies in official medical practice. Were learned physicians who wrote in Latin truly prescribing powdered toads, or were these remedies part of a parallel popular tradition of healing that the desperate inmates practiced on themselves? The lines were blurry. In a time of overwhelming death, any treatment that offered a sliver of hope, no matter how strange, was often embraced by patient and doctor alike. Pietro finishes his preparation. Your arm, he commands. There is no refusing. You hold out your forearm. He takes a wooden spatula and begins to smear the cold, gritty paste over your rash. It feels disgusting, like being covered in wet sand and graveyard dust. The smell is earthy and rank. He spreads it evenly and then wraps your arm in a strip of rough linen, creating a poultice of pure absurdity. You are now wearing a toad. For the rest of the afternoon, you are a pariah amongst pariahs. As you walk the yard, other inmates give you a wide berth, eyeing the strange, lumpy bandage on your arm. You are the man with the special cure, which somehow makes you seem even more contaminated than everyone else. Johnny just shakes his head when he sees you, a look of pity on his face. Katerina looks at the bandage, then at you, and for the first time you think you see a flicker of something in her eyes. It might be sympathy, or maybe she's just wondering if it works. That night before the final lockdown, Pietro returns and allows you to remove the bandage. You go to the water basin and scrub the gritty gray paste from your skin. You half expect a miracle. You half expect your arm to be green and covered in warts. You look down. The rash is still there. It looks exactly the same. In fact, the skin around it is now red and irritated from the abrasive paste. The miracle cure has done nothing but make it worse. You show Pietro. He frowns, not with concern for you, but with academic frustration. The patient's humoral imbalance must be more stubborn than we thought, he declares. The poison is deeply rooted. He leaves you there standing with your wet, irritated arm. The toad paste has failed. It's a shocking outcome. It seems that smearing amphibian dust on your skin is not the wonder drug the experts claimed. And in that moment, any lingering faith you had in the island's medical authorities evaporates completely. If you are going to survive this place, it will not be because of their cures. It will be in spite of them. The failure of the toad cure leaves a bitter taste in your mouth, one that has nothing to do with amphibian powder. The physician and his assistant don't bother you again. It seems that having failed to fix you with their most outlandish remedy, they have lost interest. You have been deemed incurable, a hopeless case, and are now left to simply serve out your time. A profound despondency settles over you. The hope you felt at the halfway mark has evaporated, leaving only the grim reality of the remaining days. You are a ghost haunting the dusty yard of the Lazaretto, waiting for a bell to ring. The guards are part of the landscape as featureless and grim as the brick walls. They are the enforcers of the routine, the deliverers of the bad food, the ones who bolt the door. They are a single monolithic entity of oppression, but then one afternoon, you start to notice one of them. He is younger than the others, and while his face is set in the same prescribed mask of stern authority, his eyes don't have the same dead-empty quality as the rest. You've seen him watching the inmates with something that looks less like contempt and more like weariness. Let's call him Paolo. You are sitting with your back against a wall, listlessly tracing patterns in the dirt with your finger, when Paolo makes his patrol down your section of the yard. You watch his boots approach, expecting him to pass by, just like every other time. But as he walks directly behind you out of the line of sight of the watchtower, his stride falters for a split second. You hear a soft thump on the ground right beside you. You don't look up, you just stare at the dirt. He keeps walking his pace, never changing his gaze fixed straight ahead. He does not look back. For a full minute, you don't move. You are certain it's a test, a trap, a cruel joke. But your curiosity is a physical thing, an itch you have to scratch. You glance down. Lying in the dust, partially hidden by your own shadow, is a pear. A small greenish-yellow pear, slightly bruised on one side with its stem still attached. It's not a pardon from the Doge, but right now it feels like a close second. Your heart leaps into your throat. You look around frantically. No one is watching. The other inmates are lost in their own worlds of misery. The guards in the tower are distant silhouettes. With a movement so fast you barely register it yourself, you snatch the pear and conceal it within the folds of your tunic. It feels heavy and solid, a warm living secret against your skin. You shove it deep into your garment, half expecting to be arrested for fruit smuggling. It's a serious crime here on the island, probably punishable by being forced to eat another one of the physician's salads. You spend the rest of the afternoon in a state of high alert, waiting for the accusation that never comes. The act makes no sense. Why would a guard risk punishment for such a small thing? The guards here were not the city's elite. They were often poor men, mercenaries from Venetian-controlled territories like Dalmatia, taking on a dangerous low-status job for the steady pay and food. Their lives were nearly as confined as yours, stuck on this island for months at a time. This shared prison, you realize, might occasionally blur the lines between keeper and kept. When you are finally locked in your cell for the night, you wait until Gianni's breathing has settled into a deep rhythm. In the near-total darkness, you retrieve your treasure. You hold the pear in both hands, turning it over and over. You can feel its smooth skin, the slight give of its flesh. You bring it to your nose and inhale. It smells of sunshine and orchards, a scent from another world. Then you take a bite. The explosion of flavor in your mouth is shocking. It is overwhelmingly sweet, and the juice floods your mouth, cool and refreshing. After weeks of nothing but hard, dry bread in vinegary water, the taste is a revelation. It's more than just food. The pear tastes of a world where people don't smear amphibians on each other as a form of healthcare. It's a revolutionary flavor. In this era, sugar is a luxury, a medicine even believed to provide vitality and balance. This single bruised pear is a more potent and precious dose of medicine than any of the physician's concoctions. This small anonymous act of kindness does more to heal you than any of the official cures. It's a crack in the monotonous cruelty of the system. It's a reminder that Paolo is not just a uniform, but a man, and that somewhere inside him is a flicker of compassion. Historians still debate the nature of inmate-guard relationships. Were they universally antagonistic, or were there unrecorded moments of sympathy and cooperation? This pear is your answer. It is a secret, a conspiracy of two, a tiny rebellion. You eat the entire thing slowly, savoring every last bite until only the core and the seeds are left in your hand. There is no way to thank the guard. To acknowledge the gift would be to endanger him. The kindness must remain as silent and secret as its delivery. The next day in the yard, you see Paolo on his rounds. As he passes, your eyes meet for just a fraction of a second. You give the barest of nods a millimeter of movement. He gives no sign that he has seen it. His face remains a mask. But you feel sure that he has. The message has been sent and received. And for the first time in a long time, the crushing weight of despair feels just a little bit lighter. Hope you've discovered sometimes smells like vinegar, and sometimes it tastes like a pear. The pear's sweetness lingers in your memory for days. a small, defiant kernel of hope in the barren landscape of your life. The guard Paolo remains a silent professional presence, and your shared secret is a fragile, invisible thread connecting you across the vast gulf of authority and confinement. The kindness has armed you with a new quiet resilience. You can endure this. A few days later, a new barge is spotted on the horizon. Its arrival is a major event. The entire population of the yard gravitates towards the Watergate, a silent gray tide of humanity. A new batch of inmates is a spectacle, a grim diversion from the monotony. They have that fresh, "I've just been stripped of all my worldly possessions and my will to live" look. You remember it well. It was a good look for you. More importantly, they are a source of news-living letters from a world you have been cut off from for more than 3 weeks. As soon as the dozen or so newcomers are processed and shoved into the yard, blinking in the sun, the island's black market springs into action. Information is the most precious commodity here, and fresh information is like a vintage wine. Rocco, the yard's primary broker, and other enterprising inmates descend on the new arrivals, offering a portion of their own bread ration in exchange for stories. Getting news here is like trying to assemble a mosaic from broken pieces in the dark. It is a currency of whispers and fearful glances. Johnny, with his worldly experience, is a master at this. He identifies a terrified-looking young man, a weaver's apprentice like yourself, and coaxes a story from him with a few calm words and the promise of protection from the yard's more predatory figures. Later, in the relative privacy of your cell, he shares what he has learned. The news is not good. The pestilence, which had been a low simmering threat when you were taken, has exploded in the city. The weaver spoke of entire streets in his district being sealed off at both ends by order of the health office, the doors of the houses marked with a stark red cross. No one was allowed in or out. They were left with a bit of food and then simply walled up with their sick to live or die together. Another story from a woman who worked as a fishmonger near the Rialto is even more chilling. The death carts, the carri dei morti, which used to make their rounds only under the cover of darkness, are now so busy they operate in broad daylight. Their drivers' calls of "corpi portate I vostri corpi." Bodies bring out your bodies, echoing through the empty squares. The economic life of the city is seizing up. A baker's boy whispers that the price of flour has tripled. The rich have fled to their villas on the mainland, leaving their great houses shuttered. With the masters gone, workshops are closing. There are riots in some of the poorer campi as starving people break into bakeries and storehouses. The intricate machine of Venice is grinding to a halt. You feel a desperate clawing need for news of your own small corner of the city. You find a man from your sestiere, a stonemason with fear-haunted eyes, and you pay him with the only thing you have of value of future service. You promise to use your bookbinding skills to repair the cover of his small tattered psalter if you both survive. He agrees. The bookbinder's shop on the corner of the Calle Lunga, he says, his voice rough. I think it is closed. The shutters were down for a week. I saw the master leave with his family, his cart piled high with possessions. The words hit you like a physical blow. Your master has fled. The shop is closed. The new apprentice he hired to replace you has likely been dismissed. The small life you were so desperate to return to, it might not even exist anymore. This fortress, which you saw as a prison to escape from, suddenly feels different. It feels like a sanctuary, a perverse, miserable sanctuary that is shielding you from a city that is burning with fever. The stories from the newcomers paint a picture of societal collapse. With the pestilence comes a different kind of sickness. A new doomsayer, a wild-eyed man in rags, is apparently wandering the city proclaiming that this plague is God's final judgment on the vanity and greed of Venice. He preaches that the city will sink into the lagoon before the first winter frost. Apparently, there's always a new prophet in town predicting the end of the world. You have to admire his commitment to the bit, but his timing could be better. Historians will one day argue about the true death toll of this outbreak. Was it a catastrophic wave that killed a third of the population, or a lesser, though still terrible tide that claimed 1 in 10? But for you, the statistics are meaningless. All that matters are the fragmented stories of chaos and fear whispered from one inmate to another in the dust of the lazaretto yard. Back in the cell, the news settles heavily. You are sick with worry for your parents. Did they get out? Are they healthy? The not knowing is a special kind of torture. Johnny is quiet and withdrawn. His life is the sea, his home a ship. The fate of Venice is just another piece of grim news from a foreign port. But Katerina, you watch her as Johnny recounts the stories. She sits on her pallet, her back straight, listening to the tales of sealed houses and death carts. Her face remains a mask of calm, but you see her hands twisting a loose thread from her tunic, twisting it over and over until it threatens to snap. For the first time, you see a crack in her composure. She has someone in that burning city. As dusk falls, you stand in the yard looking across the dark water towards the distant lights of Venice. The setting sun has painted the clouds above it in shades of orange and blood red, and it looks for all the world like the city is on fire. The walls of this island were built to keep you in, but you realize now they also serve another purpose. They keep the dying city out. The news of the city's decay hangs over the lazaretto like a shroud. A new, more profound despair has taken root. It's no longer just a personal fear of sickness, but a collective dread that the world you all long to return to is being consumed by fire and fever. The question that haunts the long silent afternoons and the even longer nights is no longer, will I survive? But why is this happening? The debate begins one night in the close darkness of your cell, sparked by the news of the doomsayer who stalks the streets of Venice. Fools, Johnny grunts from his pallet, his voice laced with contempt, blaming God for their own stinking city. God doesn't make plagues, bad air makes plagues. From the far side of the yard, a voice answers from the doorway of another cell. It belongs to an old man named Tommaso, a pilgrim who was taken from a ship returning from the Holy Land. He'd spent the day praying in the yard, his rosary beads clicking endlessly through his fingers. The air is God's creation, sailor. He calls out, his voice thin, but surprisingly strong. He uses it as he sees fit. This is the flagellum Dei, the scourge of God, a punishment for sin. And so the great debate of your age unfolds in whispered, passionate arguments across the dusty space between cells. It's the most passionate intellectual discussion you've ever witnessed. The topic, are we being punished by an angry God, or is the very air trying to murder us? It's a real nail-biter. Tommaso is the champion of the divine theory. He argues that Venice in its pride and wealth has brought this upon itself. He speaks of the greed of the merchants, the vanity of the women, the excesses of carnival. He insists the only cure is penance, prayer, fasting, and mortification of the flesh. He reminds everyone of the great flagellant movements of the last century, when brotherhoods of men would march from town to town, whipping themselves bloody in public spectacles, to atone for the world's sins and beg God to lift the curse of the Black Death. His is a worldview that gives the chaos meaning. The suffering is not random, it is deserved, it is a judgment. Johnny represents the other side, the scientific view of the day. He counters that it has nothing to do with sin and everything to do with miasma. Bad air. This was the theory endorsed by the learned physicians in their velvet hats. It held that the disease was a poisonous vapor that rose from rotting things, from swamps, from filth in the streets, from stagnant canals, from open graves. Think of the smell of the canals in August, old man, Johnny retorts. That's the poison. It rises in the heat and wind carries it. It gets inside you, corrupts your humors, and you die. Simple as that. This theory also makes a kind of sense. It explains why the plague seems to thrive in summer and why it hits crowded, smelly cities the hardest. It's the entire reason for the plague doctor's beaked mask, a personal air filter stuffed with perfume to block the stench. It's why the health office sometimes ordered great bonfires of juniper and rosemary in the public squares to purify the atmosphere with clean aromatic smoke. Johnny's theory is that the plague comes from bad smells. Given the state of the bucket in your cell, you figure you should all have been dead weeks ago. It's a miracle of modern science. You and the other inmates listen, caught between these two terrible certainties. Tommaso the pilgrim even brings up a stranger idea, a belief that corrupt sound could cause sickness. He claims that the unholy noise of taverns and blasphemous curses could curdle the air itself, making it receptive to the plague. He says the constant ringing of church bells is the only thing holding the evil at bay, a holy sound to drown out the demonic noise. You weigh the two ideas in your mind. If Tommaso is right, then you are a sinner being justly punished, and your only hope is a spiritual purification you may not deserve. If Johnny is right, then you are the victim of a random physical accident, A foul wind from the wrong direction, a whiff of corruption from a dirty canal, and your life is forfeit. An act of God or an act of stench. You're not sure which is more terrifying. Katerina, as always, is a silent observer to the debate. She sits with her back against the wall, listening, her expression giving nothing away. Does she believe in a vengeful God or a poisoned atmosphere? Her silence is its own philosophy. Historians still debate how strictly these two viewpoints were separated in the average person's mind. Did people truly believe in one or the other, or did they hedge their bets blending the two? It seems most likely that people believed that God, in his anger, would use the miasma as his chosen weapon. This allowed them to simultaneously pray to God for mercy while also carrying a pomander full of cloves and ambergris to sniff whenever they passed something foul. It was a way to fight the battle on both a spiritual and a physical front. The debate in the yard eventually sputters out as the final bell rings for lockdown. No one has convinced anyone of anything. Tommaso retreats to his cell to pray for the souls of the miasmatists. Johnny mutters about the ignorance of landlubbers. You are left in the dark with the two theories swirling in your head. Is that cough from the next cell a sign of God's judgment, or just the result of inhaling bad air near the tanneries? Is Lorenzo's disappearance a divine reaping, or did he just have the misfortune of living downwind from a swamp? The truth is, no one knows. Not the priests, not the physicians, not the sailors. They are all just guessing, telling stories to give a shape to the shapeless horror. And that shared absolute ignorance is perhaps the most terrifying plague of all. The debate over God's wrath and bad air leaves a residue of intellectual exhaustion on the island. The inmates have nothing to do but think, and now they have two equally terrifying theories to obsess over. This, combined with the grim news from the city, creates a new kind of desperation. What is the point of surviving your 40 days if you are only released into a ghost town, your family already dead, your workshop shuttered? For some, the thought is unbearable. The idea of escape, once a madman's fantasy, begins to fester in the dark corners of the yard. The rumors start as whispers. A young Genoese sailor, part of a crew taken from a wine freighter, is planning something. His name is Matteo. He'd received a smuggled message that his wife in the city had given birth, and that both she and the child were now sick with the fever. The news had broken him. He was a man with nothing left to lose. His plan, as pieced together from the black market gossip, was to scale the outer wall at the far end of the island, where the shadows are deepest, and swim for it. A bold strategy. The only things that swim the lagoon successfully are fish and bad news, and he was neither. The attempt happens on a moonless night. You don't see it, but you hear the aftermath. A sudden flurry of shouts from the guards on the patrol boat, the frantic sound of oars slapping against water, a brief, desperate cry from the darkness, and then an abrupt silence. The next morning, Matteo's cell is empty, but he is not at the Vecchio. He is in the island's makeshift brig, a windowless room in the base of the watchtower. The authorities know they cannot let this act of defiance pass quietly. Fear is their primary tool of control, and it must be sharpened regularly. After the morning meal, the bells ring with a different cadence, a slow tolling summons. The guards herd all of you hundreds of inmates into the main yard. A low wooden platform has been erected with a thick crossbeam supported by two posts. The commander of the lazaretto himself emerges from the main building. He is a severe, imposing man in a polished breastplate, a man you have only ever seen from a distance. He is flanked by a covey of scriveners, clerks with portable inkpots, and parchment ready to meticulously document the proceedings. Every act of state, even one of this brutality, must be recorded for the archives. Matteo is dragged onto the platform. He has been badly beaten. His face is a swollen, bruised mess, but his eyes are wild and defiant. The commander unrolls a scroll and reads the sentence in a loud, clear voice. Matteo is found guilty of violating the sacred quarantine, an act that did willfully and maliciously endanger the health and security of the most serene Republic of Venice. The punishment for such a crime must be a severe lesson for all to witness. It is not a simple flogging. They use the strappato. Matteo's hands are tied tightly behind his back. The guards throw the end of the rope over the high crossbeam. Then they begin to pull. Matteo is lifted off his feet, his entire body weight hanging from his wrists. His arms are wrenched backwards and upwards at an unnatural angle. A choked, inhuman scream of pure agony is torn from his throat as his shoulder joints are ripped from their sockets. They leave him there, hanging, his body convulsing his initial screams, fading into ragged, gasping sobs. The commander gives a long speech about duty and the safety of the Republic. It's nice to know there's a moral justification for dislocating a man's arms in front of a crowd. Really adds a touch of class to the proceedings. You stand in the silent, horrified crowd forced to watch. The sight is obscene. It is a calculated spectacle of pain designed to terrorize you into submission. Breaking quarantine, you now understand, is not just breaking a rule. In a city fighting for its life, it is the highest form of treason. It was an act of biological warfare, and the state responded with the full force of its military power. The punishment was not just for Mateo, it was for every single person watching. After what feels like an hour but is probably only 15 minutes, Mateo is cut down. He collapses onto the platform, a broken, moaning heap, and is dragged away by the guards. He is not dead, but his life as a sailor, a man who relies on the strength of his arms, is over. The crowd is dismissed. You are herded back to your routines, but the air is different. It is thick with the memory of the scream and the sight of the dangling body. Well, that was certainly a memorable bit of morning entertainment. Really brings the community together. Nothing says we're all in this together like watching a man get hoisted by his own shoulders. You return to your cell. Johnny is grimly carving notches into a piece of driftwood with a sharp stone, his jaw tight. Katerina has retreated to her corner, her face turned to the wall. The brutal spectacle has extinguished the last embers of any wild, foolish hope. There is no escape. There is no way out but the front gate. The walls are absolute. Their purpose is not just to keep the plague contained, but to keep you contained. You are a prisoner of the Republic, and your only hope for freedom lies in obedience, survival, and the slow grinding passage of time. The spectacle of Mateo's punishment hangs in the air for days, a pall of smoke that chokes out any remaining sparks of defiance. The lesson was learned. There will be no more escape attempts. There is only the long, slow grinding road of the 40 days. And then something strange begins to happen. You are now entering your 5th week, and the constant high-frequency terror that has been your companion for so long begins to fade. It is not replaced by hope, but by something far quieter, a deep, profound numbness. The mind, it seems, cannot sustain a state of perpetual panic. Like a muscle held tense for too long, it gives up, relaxing into a state of weary, protective apathy. The grim schedule, once your tormentor, becomes your comfort. The morning bell is no longer a violent intrusion, but a predictable, familiar sound. It is the first note in a song you know by heart. You wake up, you empty the bucket, you are herded into the yard. You receive your loaf of hard bread. You've even stopped noticing how bad it is. It could be made of sawdust in despair, and you'd probably still eat it. It is simply the bread, a reliable feature of a reliable world. The midday lockdown is no longer an infuriating interruption. It's a welcome respite from the sun and the suffocating presence of so many other desperate souls. Your aspirations have shrunk to fit the confines of your world. You no longer lie awake dreaming of the feel of calfskin leather or the smell of your workshop. That life belongs to someone else, to a version of you that died the day the plague doctor knocked on your door. Your new life goal is to become an expert at doing nothing. You're excelling at it. If there were a competition for most accomplished staring into space, you'd be a strong contender for the bronze. You live entirely in the present moment because the past is a locked room full of ghosts and the future is an unknowable terror. This is a known phenomenon, a process of adaptation to a total institution. Whether in a prison, a remote monastery, or a lazaretto, the human mind eventually yields to the logic of its cage. It's a kind of survival, but also a kind of surrender. You see this change in the others who have been here as long as you. The new arrivals, freshy, as the veterans call them, are easy to spot. They still have the wild, panicked look in their eyes. They still pace and rage and weep. You and the others, the long haulers, are different. You are calmer, slower. You have developed the island's peculiar slang and rhythms. You are no longer just visiting this miserable country. You are a citizen. Your small cell has become a strange, quiet home. The three of you have developed a silent understanding. You rotate the duty of emptying the bucket without a word. If Johnny acquires an extra scrap of news in the yard, he shares it freely, no longer demanding payment. You in turn use your thread and chicken bone needle to mend a rip in his tunic. One morning you wake to find that Katerina has neatly folded your blanket, a small maternal gesture that is more articulate than any word she could have spoken. You've become a strange little family. Johnny is the grumpy dad, Katerina is the silent, mysterious aunt who might be a witch, and you're the kid who just tries not to get into trouble. It's not functional, but it's what you've got. You've stopped scratching a tally mark on the wall every single night. The urgency is gone. You still keep track, but it's a less obsessive ritual. The passage of time has lost its sharp, painful edge. Historians still debate whether this adaptation was a healthy coping mechanism that allowed inmates to survive an ordeal with their sanity intact, or a destructive process that stripped them of their individuality and resilience, a social death that made them more vulnerable. You feel like it's both. The numbness is a shield protecting you from the constant blows of fear and despair. But you also feel that a part of you is being hollowed out, replaced by the routine of the lazaretto. One afternoon, you are sitting in the yard, leaning against the warm brick of a warehouse, watching the clouds drift by in the small patch of sky you can see. You are not thinking about your parents or your rash or the number of days you have left. You are not thinking about anything at all. You are just being. And in that moment, you realize with a jolt that you are not afraid. You are not hopeful. You are not anything. You are simply here. The bell rings for the midday lockdown. A month ago, the sound would have filled you with rage and impotence. Now you get to your feet without a thought, a placid animal responding to a familiar stimulus. You turn and walk towards your cell, towards the cool darkness and the waiting silence. The routine is no longer your prison. The routine is you. And in this terrible, soul-crushing acceptance, you have found a strange and fragile peace. The numb peace of the routine shatters with a single spoken word. A guard more officious than usual strides through the yard. He doesn't shout, but his voice carries with authority. All inmates whose terms expire within the week will present for final inspection in 3 days' time. The health magistrate arrives from the city at dawn. The announcement is a thunderclap in the quiet landscape of your apathy. The protective shield of numbness you have cultivated for weeks is instantly incinerated, replaced by a raw, crackling anxiety. The end is no longer a distant, hazy concept. It is an event, a date on the calendar, a final judgment, 3 days. Your entire world, which had expanded to encompass the simple, predictable rhythms of the island, now shrinks to a single point in the future. 40 days of enduring, of surviving, of witnessing horror and small kindnesses. It has all been a prelude to this one moment. A powerful man you have never met will look at you for a few seconds and decide the rest of your life. Freedom or an extension of this misery, or a one-way trip on a barge to the Vecchio. A frantic, nervous energy electrifies the yard. You and the dozen or so others whose time is also nearly up begin to prepare. It is a desperate, obsessive ritual of performing health. You scrub yourself at the water basins until your skin is raw, trying to wash away the grime and the pallor of confinement. You smooth your rough tunic, attempting to look neat and orderly. You practice standing up straight, walking with a brisk, energetic stride. It's like preparing for the most important test of your life, where the subject is not looking plaguey, and the penalty for failure is something you refuse to contemplate. Your attention returns with a vengeance to your left forearm. The original rash, the mark that condemned you, is now just a faint, ghostly memory on your skin, a patch of slight discoloration that only you would ever notice. But now it feels like a giant, glowing beacon. You stare at it for hours, willing it to disappear completely. You scrub at it with sand and harsh lye soap, trying to physically erase the last shred of evidence. The rumors about the visiting magistrate fly around the yard, traded for scraps of bread and thread. One man, a sailor who has been through the lazaretto before, swears the magistrate is a reasonable man more concerned with clearing out beds than finding fault. Another whispers that the new magistrate is a zealot, a man who sees pestilence in every shadow, and who extended one man's quarantine by 2 weeks for a nervous cough. One guy even insists the magistrate is half-blind and can be bribed with a good cheese. You find yourself hoping for the cheese guy. This man, this magistrato alla sanità, holds an almost absolute power. The health magistracy of Venice was one of the first and most powerful public health offices in Europe. During an epidemic, their authority was second only to the Doge himself. They could condemn property, seal streets, and pass sentence on individuals without any need for a trial. The man who is coming to inspect you is not just a doctor, he is a bureaucrat with the power of a king. His gaze will be a kind of twisted version of the royal touch. Kings in France and England were thought to cure the sick with a touch. This man could condemn you with a look. You and Gianni, whose 40 days are also expiring now, share a new unspoken bond of acute anxiety. His hands, usually so steady, tremble slightly as he ties his knots. He's given up all pretense of cynicism. He is just as scared as you are. Katerina watches the two of you, her face as placid as ever. Is her time also ending, or is she on a different schedule entirely? Does she feel this terror, or has she retreated so far into herself that nothing can touch her? As always, she is a silent mirror reflecting your own turmoil. Historians still debate the medical basis for these final release inspections. Were they genuine examinations, however flawed by the era's science? Or were they primarily bureaucratic rituals? Were they meant to truly assess health, or just to perform the idea of control, to reassure the city that a rational, orderly process was in place before releasing potential carriers back into its midst? You suspect that if your urine is the wrong color or your pulse is too wiry, all your apparent health will mean nothing. The night before the inspection is the longest of your life. Sleep is impossible. You lie on your pallet, your heart thumping every nerve ending, tingling with a mixture of hope and dread. You've survived. You've made it through the 40 days. You endured the fear, the hunger, the toad pace, the disappearances. You have done your time. But it's not enough. Your sentence is not truly over until the magistrate says it is. You stare into the absolute darkness of the cell, rehearsing the moment in your mind, waiting for the dawn that will bring your judge. The dawn of your 40th day arrives not with the clang of the usual bell, but with a tense, waiting silence. Today is the day of judgment. The anxiety is a physical thing, a coppery taste in your mouth. You and the other dozen inmates whose sentences are up are separated from the general population, herded into a waiting area by the island's main dock. Soon a barge approaches, not one of the usual drab transport vessels, but a sleek black boat rowed by uniformed oarsmen. A man disembarks. He is dressed in dark, expensive wool, a heavy gold chain of office around his neck. His face is stern and impassive. This is the health magistrate. He is followed by his clerks and guards, a small legion of bureaucracy and authority. The magistrate inspects the grounds with the grim satisfaction of a man who really, really loves rules. You get the feeling that if a piece of lint were out of place, he'd add another week to your sentence just for the sheer untidiness of it all. His first order of business, you are surprised to learn, is not you. It is your property. Before he will inspect the people, he must witness the final purification of the things they brought with them. You are led towards the Tesson Grande, the great warehouse that has dominated the island's skyline for your entire stay. The massive doors are thrown open, and for the first time you see inside. The space is cavernous like the nave of a great smoky cathedral. The air is thick and pungent, stinging your eyes. It's an aggressive potpourri of burning juniper rosemary and the sharp tang of sulfur. All down the 100-meter length of the building, ropes are strung between the massive wooden pillars. From these ropes hang a fortune in worldly goods, bolts of brilliant silk, rich Anatolian carpets, bales of Egyptian cotton, all undergoing their quarantine. And there, in a small, humble section at the end, are your own meager belongings, hanging like poor relations at a wealthy feast. This is the heart of the Lazaretto's true purpose. It is an immense industrial machine, designed not just to isolate people, but to launder goods, to cleanse the lifeblood of Venetian trade, so that commerce could continue with minimal interruption. The health of the people and the health of the economy were one and the same. Workers, their faces wrapped in cloths soaked in vinegar, move through the haze tending to large smoking braziers. They use long poles to lift and turn the hanging fabrics, ensuring the thick aromatic smoke penetrates every fiber. A guard appears with a canvas bundle marked with your name. He opens it and begins to hang your items on an empty line. Your spare tunic, your winter cloak, your small, worn satchel, and last he pulls out the little wooden bird your father carved. He ties a bit of string around it and hangs it from the line where it begins to twist slowly in the dense smoke, a tiny, helpless captive in this vast, impersonal ceremony. You watch a strange detachment settling over you. That bird, your one link to your past, is now just another fomite, another object to be purged of its invisible poisons. This ritual isn't for you. It's a piece of political theater, a demonstration for the magistrate, proving the diligence and power of the Venetian state. The magistrate begins his inspection. He walks slowly down the length of the warehouse, his hands clasped behind his back. He does not touch anything. He merely observes, his critical gaze taking in every detail. His clerks follow, scribbling notes in their ledgers. Every item here, from the most expensive silk to your little wooden bird, has been logged, its 40-day purification process meticulously documented. Historians will one day debate the intent of this ceremony. Was it a genuine medical procedure based on the science of the day, or was it a carefully staged performance designed to impress and reassure? Looking at the magistrate's severe expression and the frantic diligence of the workers, it feels like both. They believe in the ritual, and they believe in the importance of being seen to believe in it. The magistrate reaches your section. He glances at your pathetic collection of belongings. He looks at the smoking brazier beneath them. He nods once, a curt, satisfied gesture. A clerk makes a final check in his book. The purification is officially deemed complete. The guards remove your things from the line. They are warm to the touch and reek of smoke. Your clothes, which once smelled of you, now have a bold new aroma of smoked meats and anxiety. They are folded and placed in your satchel, ready to be returned. The ritual of the goods is over. The magistrate turns his gaze away from the textiles and fixes it on the small group of human beings waiting nervously at the entrance. His face is unreadable. He has judged your property and found it clean. Now he will judge you. He says nothing but gestures with a single gloved finger, beckoning the first person in line to step forward into the light. That person is you. You step forward. The short walk from the relative anonymity of the group into the open space before the magistrate's table feels like crossing a vast and barren desert. The sounds of the yard, the wind, the distant cry of gulls, the shuffling of the other inmates all seem to fade away, replaced by the deafening drum of your own blood in your ears. You try to look confident and healthy, a difficult look to pull off when your knees are threatening to go on strike and you're wearing a drab sackcloth tunic. You halt before the table. The magistrate, whose power had been a terrifying abstraction, is now just a man. He's older than you expected, with tired eyes and deep lines of worry etched around his mouth. He doesn't look at you. His gaze is fixed on the great ledger his clerk has opened. This is not a human interaction. It is the final step in a long administrative process. The physician from the island and the barber surgeon Pietro stand beside him, ready to offer their expert opinions. It's like a very, very weird job interview. The subject is a bookbinder's apprentice, the clerk intones, reading from the ledger. Admitted 40 days prior for a cutaneous anomaly. The magistrate looks at the island physician. Your assessment. The physician clears his throat. As noted, the subject presents with a choleric temperament, hot and dry. A precautionary phlebotomy was administered to cool the blood. He has since displayed no overt signs of pestilential fever, no delirium, no tokens. The magistrate nods slowly, then looks at you for the first time. His eyes are gray and dispassionate. Present yourself for examination. Pietro steps forward. His touch is as rough and impersonal as you remember. He feels the glands in your neck, then has you lift your arms so he can press his fingers into your armpits, searching for the telltale swellings, the dreaded buboes. He finds nothing. He steps back and shakes his head at the magistrate. The magistrate's gaze returns to the ledger. The anomaly on the forearm, he says, his voice flat. He looks up at you. Show me. This is it. The culmination of 40 days of fear and boredom and misery. Everything comes down to this single patch of skin. Your heart feels like it's trying to beat its way out of your chest. With a hand that you pray is steady, you slowly, deliberately roll up the sleeve of your tunic. You hold out your left arm palm up for his inspection. Time seems to stretch, becoming thick and syrupy. You look down at your own arm as if it belongs to someone else. You remember the angry red bumps that started this nightmare. You remember smearing it with goose fat and then with the foul toad paste. And now, there is nothing. 40 days of a meager diet of sun and sea air and of your body's own quiet work have erased the mark completely. There is no rash. There is no blemish. There is not even a faint discoloration. There is only pale, clean skin. For a second, you have a wild panic that the rash has chosen this exact moment to reappear, perhaps with little festive flags this time, just for the drama of it all. But no, it is well and truly gone. The magistrate leans forward, his eyes narrowed in concentration. Pietro and the physician also lean in to look. A trinity of experts staring at your forearm. The silence is absolute. In their worldview, health and sickness have a tangible quality and aura. They are searching your skin not just for a mark, but for any sign of corruption, any hint of the Swedish, cloying scent of decay that was believed to emanate from the sick. After an eternity that lasts perhaps 5 seconds, the magistrate straightens up. His face is unreadable. He has seen all he needs to see. He gives his clerk a single, almost imperceptible nod. The clerk who had his quill poised over the ledger dips it into the inkpot. Next to your name in the column marked Outcome, he writes a single beautiful word, Sano. Healthy. This one word is the key to your freedom. In the vast bureaucracy of the Venetian plague response, this is the final crucial step. This notation in the ledger allows for the issuing of a fed di sanità, a certificate of health. It is the most valuable document in Italy, a passport that proves you have served your time and are officially clean. Without it, you cannot work, travel, or even enter another city. The clerk looks up, not at you, but at the space just past your shoulder. Released, he announces, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. The word doesn't compute. It's too large, too momentous to fit into your shrunken world. You are still standing there, arm outstretched, your mind reeling. Released just like that, after everything, it ends with a quiet scratch of a pen. The magistrate has already forgotten you. His attention has moved on. He gestures to the next person in line. Next, he says, his voice weary, "It's Gianni's turn." The word released echoes in the cavernous space of your skull, but it doesn't quite land. You step back in a daze, your mind a complete blank as Gianni is called forward. You watch him go through the same motions, the inspection of his glands, the presentation of his arms. You see the magistrate give the same curt nod. You hear the same flat pronouncement from the clerk, "Released." A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckles your knees washes over you. You are not leaving alone. Of the dozen inmates in your group, 8 of you pass. 4 others, for reasons you can't discern, a persistent cough, a look of weakness, a shadow on their skin only the magistrate could see, are told their quarantine is extended by another 20 days. You watch their faces crumble, and you have to turn away, a sharp pang of survivor's guilt twisting in your gut. The 8 of you who passed are herded back to where it all began, the cold processing room. The same board clerk sits at the same desk. This time, however, the mood is entirely different. A guard brings out your original satchels, the bundles of confiscated clothing still reeking of purifying smoke. You are instructed to change. You strip off the hated gray tunic for the last time, letting the rough, itchy sackcloth fall to the floor. You pull on your own clothes. The fabric of your old tunic, once merely common wool, now feels impossibly soft against your skin. It smells like a smoked ham, which is a significant improvement over its former aroma of vague misery and despair. Putting on your own shoes, feeling the familiar worn leather enclose your feet, is a profound comfort. It is an act of reclaiming yourself. You are no longer an inmate. You are you again. Once dressed, you are called one by one to the desk. The clerk hands you a small folded piece of parchment. It is your fede di sanità, your health pass. It bears your name, the date, and the official wax-sealed stamp of the Magistrati alla Sanità. This document, you understand, is the key to the rest of your life. It is an invention born of necessity, a passport for moving through a world terrified of contagion. Without it, you are a ghost, unable to work, travel, or even prove your right to exist. The clerk hands it to you with a warning, "Guard this with your life." You briefly consider having it framed, but decide that just not losing it is a more achievable goal. With your papers in hand and your smoky satchel over your shoulder, you walk as a group towards the Watergate. As you cross the yard for the last time, the inmates who are being left behind watch you go. Their faces are a sea of envy, longing, and bitter despair. You see the old man with the sundial. He doesn't look up, his attention still fixed on the shadow of his stick. You search the crowd for a familiar face and see her, Katerina, standing near the wall of your cell block. She watches you leave, her expression unreadable as ever. But just as you're about to pass from her view, she raises a hand and gives a single small wave. It is the most dramatic, eloquent gesture you have ever seen from her. You and Gianni walk side by side. At the dock, you shake hands. It's an awkward, understated farewell. No grand speeches are needed. You have both been to hell and back, and the knowledge of it will always be a silent bond between you. "Stay healthy, bookbinder," he says, clapping you on the shoulder. He is not returning to Venice proper, but heading straight for the main port to find a ship. The sea is his home. You watch him join a different barge, one headed for the commercial docks. You step onto your own barge, a clean one, reserved for the released. The guards pull on the heavy chains and the massive wooden gate groans open. A brilliant, shocking rectangle of light appears. The sunlight is so bright it feels like a physical assault. You who have spent 40 days becoming a creature of gloom and shadow are not prepared for this level of aggressive cheerfulness from the sky. The barge pushes off and glides out from under the stone arch. You are in the open. The sheer vast space of the lagoon is dizzying after the confines of the yard. The world explodes into color, the deep, impossible green of the water, the searing blue of the sky, the rich earthy reds and ochres of the distant city. It is a sensory assault, a feast for eyes that have been starved on a diet of gray and brown. As you pull away from the island, you notice a stray dog trotting along the dock, wagging its tail. It's a good omen. Saint Rash, the patron saint of your ordeal, was famously cared for by a dog who brought him bread and licked his plague sores until he was healed. Perhaps the saint is sending you off with his blessing. Historians will one day debate how quarantine survivors were received back into society. Were you a hero having endured an ordeal for the public good? Or were you permanently stigmatized, a person marked by sickness, forever suspect? You don't know the answer. All you know is that you are holding your health pass and you are leaving this island behind. The lazaretto shrinks in your wake, its grim walls becoming smaller and smaller, until it is just another smudge on the horizon. You are free. You are sailing towards Venice. But it is the Venice of the terrifying rumors, the city of sealed houses and daytime death carts. Your ordeal of confinement is over. Your ordeal of return is about to begin. The barge glides through the canals of Venice, and with every pull of the oars, the lazaretto shrinks behind you, a bad dream fading with the morning light. You clutch your health pass, the stiff parchment, a solid, real thing in your hand. You are sano. You are free. You are going home. But the city that receives you is not the one you left. The barge lets you off at a small deserted quay, not the bustling waterfront you expected. The boatman is eager to leave, pushing off before you've even fully found your footing on the stone. The first thing that strikes you is the silence. Venice, a city that should be roaring with the noise of commerce, of life, of 10,000 mingling conversations, is quiet. It's a deep, unnatural quiet that prickles the skin. The city is so quiet you could hear a pin drop, assuming the pin wasn't already dead of the plague. You begin the long walk to your home, a ghost returning to a ghost town. The alleys, usually teeming with people, are nearly empty. The few souls you see scurry past with their heads down, faces covered with scarves, their eyes wide with fear. There are no children playing, no merchants haggling, no lovers whispering in doorways. The social fabric of the city has been torn to shreds. You see the evidence of the plague's fury firsthand. A house at the end of a lane has its door and windows boarded over a crude red cross painted on the wood, a stark warning. The sweet, cloying smell of sickness and death hangs heavy in the air, a scent you are now intimately familiar with. In the larger squares, bonfires smolder, burning juniper and rags, in a futile attempt to cleanse the air. You pass your local bakery. It is shuttered. The butcher shop is closed. The great roaring engine of Venice has seized. On the corner of one street, you see a new hastily painted mural of Saint Sebastian, his body pierced with arrows. In an age of invisible death, people saw the plague as God's arrows, and they filled their city with desperate painted prayers. As you turn a corner, you hear a rumble and the cry of the bikini. A death cart laden with bodies wrapped in white shrouds is coming towards you. You press yourself into a doorway, making yourself small as the gravediggers pass. They are gaunt, hard-faced men, their movements grimly efficient. This is the new traffic of your city. You have returned. A survivor, a hero. No one notices. You consider throwing your own parade, but it would just be you walking slowly and trying not to step on a corpse. The economic devastation is plain to see. The plague didn't just kill people, it killed the city's wealth. With trade halted, taxes unpaid, and the state spending a fortune on containment, the Republic was bleeding gold as surely as Pietro the barber surgeon had bled you. Historians will one day debate the long-term social consequences. Did this shared trauma lead to nihilism or piety? But right now, all you see is a city holding its breath, praying it doesn't choke. You finally arrive at your street. It is empty. Your master's workshop is dark and shuttered. Signora Elena's window across the courtyard is closed tight. You climb the familiar creaking stairs to your attic room. The door is unlocked. You push it open and step inside. The room is just as you left it 40 days ago. A shaft of afternoon sun cuts through the grime on the window, illuminating a universe of swirling dust motes. A thick layer of gray dust covers everything: your stool, your small table, the floor. It is a perfect time capsule of the moment your life was interrupted. You look at the 28 scratches you managed to make on the wall. A lifetime ago, you are a stranger in your own home, a ghost in your own past. You have survived the lazaretto only to return to this, the profound echoing silence of a city hollowed out by fear. Your room is just as you left it, plus a new thick coating of dust. It's good to see that while you were away fighting for your life, the dust was busy living its best life. Good for the dust. You sit on the edge of your dusty bed, the ordeal finally truly over, and you wait to see what comes next. And now your own long journey is ending as well. The story is over, and the time for sleep has come. Just let the final images begin to soften and fade, like your own dusty, quiet room settling into the stillness of the night. The sharp edges of the day can recede the worries, and the list can be set aside for a while, left to wait patiently for the morning sun. There is nothing more you need to do, nothing you need to solve or think about. Your only task now is to yield to the gentle, heavy pull of slumber, to let your breathing become deep and slow and even. Imagine the soft weight of your blankets, a comforting anchor in the quiet dark. The world outside, with all its noise and clamor, is very far away from you now. Here in this space, there is only calm. There is only rest. The city has fallen quiet, the last bell has been rung, and a deep and profound peace can finally settle over you, carrying you gently into your dreams. Sweet dreams.